late. I'm afraid I've had some champagne to drink, some gin and tonic, had quite a big meal, roast lamb and so on. It's my dad's 81st birthday tomorrow, so we kind of had a big sort of dinner. I did drink quite a lot of champagne, so if I'm a little bit off my game, let's blame it on that, shall we? I do hope you guys are going to keep an open mind, have a bit of a sense of humor, have a bit of a suspend some of your thoughts a little bit and allow me to communicate a little bit of what I want to talk about. I've spent about 4 days putting together what I'm going to present you tonight. So hopefully it'll be of some use to you guys. Jean Karras, good to see you here. Jean says, I'll be late coming to chat today. Okay. Pauline, good to see you here. Robbie Robin, Wanzi, Margaret Zabinski. Pauline says, I promise an open mind. We've got quite a lot to go through, but before I kind of get to that, I want to share something with you that came up at this dinner, which was quite interesting, and I think goes to the psychology of this case as well. My sister went to order a burger. This is a true story, of course. My sister went to order a burger. She said to the guy, can I have a cheese and bacon burger? And he said, we don't have cheese and bacon, but we've got bacon and cheese. So it might be funny, but it gives you an idea of how programmed one can be in terms of your reality, right? And that's kind of a theme that I want to get to, is this idea that Johnny's reality has actually become, I don't want to say everyone's reality, but reality for a lot of people. And what does that actually mean, right? So if you support Johnny Depp, it kind of means that Johnny's reality is your reality. And then the question is, what does that mean? So we're going to get to that. Okay. So that's the first thing I wanted to say to you guys. Bruce, good to see you here. Mary Steelman, hi from San Antonio, Texas. Metal Mommy 90, hi from South Carolina. Metal Mommy, do you know the author Delia Owens? She wrote a book, Where the Crawdads Sing. Do you know about that book? It's become kind of like an international phenomenon, and a movie's been made about that as well. Gina Bartoloni, I respect you so much. You're my number one go-to for truth in true crime. Thank you, Nick. Wow, it's good to hear that. I'm always a little bit on tenterhooks when I do a Culture's Wrath type episode because of, I know it's sort of where angels fear to tread. So I reserve the right to cut this broadcast short if things get out of hand, but hopefully everyone's going to be civil and kind and well-mannered and have that sort of scout mindset where you feel like you can learn something possibly, or you're open to the terrain that you might not know about, instead of digging in like a soldier. Robbie Robin, Sherry Burnett says, I love Delia's book. Well, I've actually got it here. I might as well bring this up while we're at it. At dinner, my father's girlfriend, when I mentioned the book, my father's girlfriend mentioned it as well. And I said, did you know that the author of this book is also the author of this book? And she adamantly said that that wasn't true. And she's like a professor of English, a very accomplished reader. But she was like absolutely insisting it wasn't written by Delia Owens. And I was like, yes, it was. And so it was just quite interesting, her being absolutely certain about something, then checking, and then finding out that it was Delia Owens, and then continuing to insist that it wasn't, and then sort of eventually grudgingly, reluctantly saying, okay, well, I guess the author of the book is Delia Owens. And I think the reason why she maybe didn't like that idea is this is such a lyrical book. And this book, although also a very well-written book, it's based in Africa. in the Kalahari. This one's based in South Carolina. So in her mind, she may have thought they're totally different people. Whereas in my mind, I thought, well, they're both set in nature and they sort of have that in common. Anyway, it's just interesting how your reality, what you say to yourself, can actually trump actual reality. What's the truth about the situation? And the only way you get to that is when you have a kind of an open mind. Samantha Dang. Okay, thanks a lot for that. Marty Furlong, I have no personal feelings for either, but on the basis of the testimonies, I feel that Amber did not appear credible. Well, that's what a lot of people say. So if you haven't voted in the poll, make sure you do vote. We're approaching, 100 votes. Should Amber Heard appeal? So far, 19%, around about a fifth of you say yes. 2/3 of you say no, she shouldn't appeal. And then 15% say, can she afford an appeal? And I think that's really the key question here. If she can afford an appeal, which is actually quite a big if, even if she can come up with the money, should she pursue it? Because now you're starting to spend millions upon millions upon millions. And if you win, what do you win in the end? So especially if you consider this whole idea that it's been sort of touted, it's sort of been put out there that Johnny might not actually insist on her paying him what comes to 8.35 million. He may not insist that she pays it. So this really makes sense to keep pushing it. And I think there's some interesting arguments for and against. I think one of them is if she appeals and wins, that might be the first step to rehabilitating her image and thus her career. On the other hand, you could say it's all a fait accompli and she's lost already kind of thing. But if you add together those who say, yes, she should appeal, and can she afford to appeal, which may be, well, if she can, she should, that comes to around about a third of you, which is quite a few. I don't know if I'm making the right, drawing the right inference from those numbers. Maybe I'm not. But yeah, about 2/3 of you say no, she shouldn't appeal. So that's something I want you to think about as we go through the information that I'm going to share with you. Bria, good to see you here. Bria from France. Nisi, good to have you as well. Sherry says, what grounds would she appeal on? Curious about your thoughts on this. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. Metal Mommy says, I kind of want her to so she can get embarrassed again. LOL, okay. Susan, I did read your previous comment. You said, have you seen the video clips on video? So, yeah, I don't know if you want me to deal with that right now. I am maybe going to deal with the, cue the horrified face, right? And so you put that on your video and then you say, Amber cheated on Johnny. And then that gets 2 million views, right? The flip side to that is Amber said that she thought Johnny was cheating on her the day after her wedding, but no horrified things for that. But anyway, I think we'll come back to that a little bit later. For Truth says, I would struggle to walk away knowing a man, I feel the same way. If I felt like it was the wrong outcome, I would also struggle to walk away. But maybe she does need to, right? Even if she's right, maybe the right thing for her is to sort of let it go. But from a legal perspective, that's the perspective we really want to look at. Samantha Dang says, if she's smart, she will get therapy. I think she is getting therapy. Yvette says the trial was not about cheating. Good point. Okay, so are you guys ready to get going? Are you guys ready to get started with the analysis? Again, if you guys missed it, I want to sort of bring it up again, this idea of my sister going into a burger place saying, "Do you have a cheese and bacon burger?" And the guy looking straight back and saying, "No, but we do have a bacon and cheeseburger." It's like your reality is so carved in stone, it's so programmed that you're sort of unable to think a little bit further than that. Like, are you thinking about what you're actually thinking about? Are you thinking about what you're saying? Are you thinking? Okay, so let's get going. Now, unfortunately, with the format that I've got here, I can't show you exactly what I'm talking about. I will try and do that. So those of you who are on your desktops, I will provide links. If you completely unsure what I'm talking about, just go to the previous video that I posted on Caitlin Armstrong's car being located. I put a couple of images there that show photos of Amber Heard, Jason Momoa, Johnny Depp, and another lady, and it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about now. So if you feel like it's too cerebral and you need pictures to see what I'm talking about, that'll sort of help you. Again, it's the last video I posted, and it's in the last 20 to 30 seconds of it. But I will provide you guys with some links so that you can go and look. So I can't speak very eloquently. We're going to get to the legalities in a moment, but I'm going to first start with optics and how we look at this case through a purely optical perspective. And I guess that's to be expected when these are both movie stars. It's people that we look at, we get a sense of who they are by what they look like, how they act, right? And so I can't speak very eloquently on how you or America sees Johnny Depp, but I do think it's worth noting how Hollywood sees Amber Heard and who they see as a romantic interest. And I think that's just an interesting kind of thought experiment to lead into the next part of this discussion. So regardless of how you see Johnny Depp, regardless of how you see Amber Heard, think about how Hollywood sees Amber Heard and who they see her in a relationship with, but within a movie context. And is it someone who looks like the Johnny Depp we saw in court? A largish, well, not a large, but a fairly elderly fellow, 58 years old. He sort of looks in a way younger than he really is. He's sort of got a ponytail on. He's got these rings on. He's got earrings in the shape of, I think, safety pins. He wears these sort of edgy glasses, almost like he's a rock star. But you kind of get the sense he's a bit like a aging rock star. But then there's also a sense that his skin is starting to become a little pocked. And he's definitely not the Johnny Depp of Edward Scissorhands. He's not the Johnny Depp of, like a long time ago. Welcome. Is it Lebuku? Welcome. So instead of, so what I'm trying to get at is the Johnny Depp that Hollywood, sorry, not the Johnny Depp, the partner that Hollywood puts with Amber Heard is this person. And that's what he looks like. And have a look at this as well. And have a look at this as well. Donna says Amber Heard needs to give it a rest. Okay. Yvette says, blah, 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 and he knew this. What could go wrong? Good point. Okay, so if you can't see what I've just posted there, it's basically 3 images from Amber Heard's Instagram. So it's the 3 images of Amber with Jason Momoa, and it is almost like a very young, very handsome Jack Sparrow in a way. It's basically the Jason Momoa of Game of Thrones, of Aquaman. And if you've seen him in the movies, he's got a a great youthful, and I don't know, he's got a great masculine energy, right? But the most important thing to sort of add to that is he's a youthful star. He's got a vigorousness that young male stars have that older male stars just don't have. And that is who Hollywood puts Amber with in terms of the way they see them, how Hollywood sees Amber and how Hollywood sees Jason Momoa's character. And I think if you look at those images, you look at him and her, you get a sense of incredibly beautiful people. Jason Momoa is a very good-looking guy. Amber Heard also. Very recently, there was an article saying that Amber Heard has been, I don't know if it's regarded or voted as the world's most beautiful woman, or certainly the world's most beautiful face, based on a certain kind of calculation, right? And that's an aspect that I don't think has really been dealt with in much detail. I'm not going to deal with it much here. I'll touch on it lightly, but I mean, we can deal with it maybe in more detail in a different episode. But just by looking at Jason Momoa's Instagram, it's clear that 50-year-old Johnny, no matter how beloved he is or was, has got some stiff competition right now as a man, as an actor, as a male lead. So if I were Johnny, sober or drunk, it would make sense to be paranoid about losing his younger girl to a younger man. It would be natural to feel insecure and inadequate. Do you guys agree with that? Or do you think that what I'm saying is not true? I'm just trying to make a very basic point that if you were Johnny, who's 58 years old, you look at these images of Jason Momoa and Amber on her Instagram, wouldn't you feel insecure about that, right? And when you look at photos of Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow, and you compare them to Jason Momoa, compare the almost cartoon-like figure of Jack Sparrow to the almost comic book character of Aquaman, of Jason Momoa, they are totally different. They're totally different. The one is sort of a very strong, supposedly moral character, and the other one is almost like a Weasley character, charming and kind of funny and amusing, but sort of inebriated and sort of Weasley in a way, but also kind of beloved. I'm just saying they're very different, aren't they? 12th man says wrong. Okay. Gina says he'd be insecure. I believe he showed it. For Truth says absolutely. Pauline says with you so far. Okay. Robbie Robbins says yes, true. Okay. So let's move on to the next step. So if you take that further, so I'm trying to compare characters that Hollywood have sort of used and put out there of Johnny Depp fairly recently. One of them is Jack Sparrow. Another one is the wizard Grindelwald. Now, if you imagine the wizard Grindelwald and Amber Heard sharing screen time, does it sort of work? And I don't know if you guys have seen pictures of the wizard Grindelwald. He's sort of got white hair, it sort of stands up. I think his one eye is one color, the other eye is another color. He looks like at least a 40-year-old, I guess. But I mean, obviously it's an older actor, and he's also an evil person, put it that way, as far as I know. Again, ideally you need to see pictures of the wizard Grindelwald. He's also got a moustache, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And so the point is, when you see how Hollywood views these people, it's quite different from the way the public does. I'm talking about how the public views Johnny Depp and how the public views Amber Heard. And now I wonder if the outcome of the trial would have been different if Amber Heard showed up looking, for example, as beautiful as she can be, instead of dowdy and understated. And I think the answer to that is it wouldn't have worked very well. I think it would have come across as even worse, that she's actually even more of a horrible, like, in other words, if she'd come to to court looking as attractive as she can, I think that would have played against her, where people would have said, you are a temptress, you are a mistress, you are all of this kind of thing, right? And so if you think about it, could making Amber appear out of the league of the jurors, remember it was a mostly male jury, 5 men, 2 women, could that have worked in her favor and made her appear more attractive to them, perhaps more respectable than going for the accessible but dour vibe? Do you guys know what the word dour means? Some of you may know what it means, but it's worth just being explicit about it. Dour is relentlessly severe, stern, gloomy in manner of appearance, unsmiling, frowning. Those are all words to describe how Amber appeared kind of in court. Johnny was kind of almost the opposite of dour. He was whimsical, charming, smiling, giggling, accessible, all those things. So then you say, should she have looked more attractive? And then you say, well, then she would look like a temptress or a vamp or, you know, some kind of evil, you know, like a witch figure in like, what's it? Snow White, you know, the wicked witch is also really beautiful. Who's the fairest of them all? She's beautiful, but there's someone who's fairer. And so you're some kind of witch-like figure. And we're going to talk about this being like a witch trial. So if you say, do you guys agree that going the vamp alternative wouldn't have worked? Making Amber gorgeous would have been almost like, you're not taking this seriously. This isn't a movie role. This isn't a fashion display. And if she came in wearing like really glamorous clothes and each day was this incredible thing, it wouldn't really have worked. But on the flip side, if you think about Johnny Depp's suits, you almost got the idea that he was like a peacock, that he wore quite extravagant ties, whereas Amber dressed down to some extent. So let me just do a quick poll. Do you think Amber should have dressed or try to make her appearance more beautiful, or should she have looked more sort of unattractive? Which way do you think was the way to go? Margaret says, seems she was in a no-win. For Truth says she wore dark colors too, whereas Camille Vasquez wore white, well, on that one occasion. Sherry Burnett says, more hateable, not fair, but true. Gina says they'd have called her a succubus. Bruce says her optics wasn't as dour as Danielle. Very good point. Very good point. I don't think her clothes counted against her. Okay, so maybe she could have had her appearance. Maybe she could have what Danielle Redlin was able to do was stop dyeing her hair, and she actually had grey hair, or I presume she's got grey hair. That obviously wasn't on the cards for Amber. Maybe Johnny could have done that. Johnny could have stopped dyeing his hair and come to court grey, and that would have made him look even more pathetic. Ricardo says she first started copying Johnny Depp's style. Did you see the beepin? I remember that. Pauline says, I think Amber was going for business, like in suits, etc. Something that I thought was quite interesting and possibly, and I hate the way this sounds like spin, but Amber said, I never want to be a victim. But maybe if she'd entertained that idea a bit more, that I am a victim, because look at where she is now, maybe she would have gained more sympathy than she did. She said on quite a few occasions that she thought of herself as someone who's quite tough, and that she also said that Johnny once did something to her and said, you think you're tough, you think you're tough. So that to me resonates. And also her acting coach said she doesn't cry very easily. And I think that's part of the kind of person she is. If you guys are interested, I might and if there's time, I might touch on Amber's a middle child. What does that mean? If you guys want to know a little bit more about Amber Heard as a person compared to what we already know. I've got a feeling most of you don't really care about that stuff. Like, I don't really want to know who Amber Heard is, but if you guys are interested, we can touch on that a little bit later. Zenaida Rivera, good to see you. Baby says she casually dresses like her ex. Okay. Lisa Stokes is understated but elegant. For Truth says, I think it was better for her to look like one of us. Susan says it would not have mattered. Okay. I think I disagree with that, although it's difficult because she's a movie star. So how do you make a movie star who's inherently beautiful look ordinary? It's quite difficult. If you think about Casey Anthony and Jodi Arias, how their appearance has changed. They look totally different on the stand, and it definitely helped in Casey Anthony's case. Okay, so another case I want to talk to you guys about tomorrow, but again, it depends on how much you're interested. We'll see, but it's the Danielle Redlick case. It's a woman who stabbed her husband and he died, and it was apparently a marriage that had DV written all over it. And so they have an altercation, he dies, and a lot of the comments I saw on YouTube, what drew me to that case was the verdict being read out and how she responded, and also when she committed the crime, her hair was like brown, right? And when she appeared in court, she was gray with a bun. And people said that is how a domestic victim, a DV victim must act. That is real, and what Amber did in court isn't right. And that is what I want to address in the live after this one. So you might be quite scornful of this whole approach. You might be saying, how on earth can you just be talking about appearances? You should dress like that. It's going to have no impact. Some of you have even said that, it would make no difference. That mere looks, mere optics might influence a jury, but that is exactly what lawyers count on in the theater that is a jury trial. And by the way, we are a superficial society. We are a superficial society that is obsessed with surfaces. It's the reason why social media platforms like Instagram, like Facebook to some extent, exist. They're all about surfaces. They're about what people look like. They're about how we're expressing ourselves outwardly. But for a society obsessed with surfaces, how good are we at looking below the surface? How good are we at subtlety and nuance? And if you're getting a lot of practice looking at surfaces, doesn't that mean you're not getting a lot of practice looking at reality? You're not getting a lot of practice looking at things that aren't so obvious. Another way of putting it is, if you watch TV all day, watch a lot of movies, read a lot of books, is that going to give you a great insight into how people are? Answer, no. You're going to be very naive. And a great example of a person like that who got his education from books and so on was Vincent van Gogh. And so he had a really messed up romantic life for quite a long time because his idea of reality and reality were totally different. Because he was to some extent also obsessed with surfaces. He was looking at art, he was looking at pictures the whole time, and he spent a lot less time dealing with actual people. So I want to ask you guys the question again. We live in a society that is obsessed with surfaces. So how good are we? Also, how good are you? Also, how good am I at looking below the surface? How good are we at subtlety and nuance? And that brings me to the aspect I really want to discuss here, which is Amber's odds of winning an appeal. And I want you to think about what I've just asked you, where you thinking about surfaces. Remember, I keep hearing Amber is a liar and I saw this video and all these things. And now we're going to deal with the legal merits, the legal arguments to whether she has a case to appeal. And this is where we are looking below the surface at subtlety and nuance within a legal context. We're looking below the surface of how these people look and saying, in terms of the law, what is there, right? So you guys ready? So the question is, what are the odds that Amber could win an appeal if she does appeal? What do you guys think the answer is to that before I go into this? So Bria says, is it more about how we look or how we behave? I think it's both. Looks, it's not like looks don't matter. It's looks do matter, but I think it's being attentive long enough to see beyond the surface and being able to listen and being able to, a really good example of what I'm getting at is when I watched the Danielle Redlin verdict, and then I went into it, I was racing to decide, do I believe her or not? And you should actually do the opposite. You should try and suspend your judgment or your bias for long enough where you say, let me gather more information. And even when you gathered information, you say, I'm starting to make up your mind, push that back and say, let me continue to gather subtleties. Let me gather nuance. Let me gather more. Oh, but I'm starting to feel like I'm quite certain now. Stop. Push that aside. Continue to gather information. We tend to be the opposite. I want to be certain as quickly as possible. I want to rush to judgment. That's what social media is all about. I'm going to react right now. I'm going to be certain right now. I'm going to know right now how I feel about this. I'm going to be adamant right now. I'm not going to budge from what I think. Susan Smith says, has she had a psychological exam? Yvonne says, anything's possible. Good to see you, Yvonne. Nisi says, with the TV interviews after, hard for me to see her win an appeal, just a thought. Okay. For Truth says she has a good chance of winning an appeal if they stick to the facts, evidence, and the law. Bruce T says the verdict shapes your bias. We don't want to hear that first. Shugirl ABK says just joining conversation. I'm a bit late. Welcome. Lily Rose Bush says even if she appeals, the therapist notes are still hearsay. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure if the therapist notes are privileged either, but certainly something that's come up. Gathering Place says, I change my mind, my opinion sometimes. So Haley Tatlock says, I think Amber's a really good chance with an appeal. Lacey says, jury was allowed to go on social media. That's not due process of the law, in my opinion. Donna Farnsworth says, her clothing mirrored Johnny Depp every day. Okay. Linda says she was chasing him. Okay, so let's get going with the question I asked earlier. Well, what are the odds of Amber winning an appeal or not? You must bear in mind, if she appeals, so in other words, if she goes through the process of appealing, that's not guaranteed. You lodge an appeal and then the appeal is either accepted and then it becomes an appeal. So it's not like you automatically get an appeal. You've got to meet certain requirements. Does that make sense? In other words, when you appeal, you ask for the case to be reheard, then that request is then examined. If it's accepted, then the appeal goes ahead. It's not like a given. So first of all, in an appeal, none of the things I've just mentioned matter. Appearances, surfaces, superficial things. So social media doesn't matter, dress code doesn't matter, hairstyle doesn't matter, none of those things. None of these become relevant in a purely legal examination. And it's also a purely legal examination of the case, not by laymen, but by judges. Secondly, and perhaps more important, an appeal is a process that may take years. So if Amber is going to pursue this, she must be pretty sure that it is what she wants to do, because it's going to take up the next 2-3 years of her life. So by the time this is over, she'll be 38, 39, almost 40 years old. Do you really want to use up this time doing that? On the other hand, you might say, well, I don't have any movie deals. What else is there to do? It's the last card I've got to play. I've got nothing else to lose. I've already lost everything. So either way, it's likely to be very costly. That's a really important aspect. If you're going to appeal, it's a process that can take years and it's likely to be very costly. But if Amber Heard is able to secure a book deal for $10 million, that ought to do it. Now, I don't know whether that's reasonable or not. I'm just saying if she can get $10 million for a book deal, that should cover kind of her expenses. Now, you might laugh at that and say, there's no way she's going to get $10 million for a book deal. But think about this. Think about it. Let's compare apples with apples. Given that Amanda Knox's $4 million book deal 10 years ago, so she got this book deal in 2012, she got $4 million for her book deal. I think it was a record at the time with HarperCollins. I don't know, 10 million doesn't seem like a big deal compared to that. Amanda Knox, 4 million, Amber Heard, 10 million. It seems like it's possible. It seems like a cinch in comparison. Now, she could even get a 3 million book deal and then a 7 million movie deal for the book, something like that. So again, if you want to compare apples with apples, if you want to say, well, let's compare Amanda Knox's, she got a book deal for $4 million. Well, Amanda Knox on Instagram has got 112,000 followers. I've written about 5 books on Amanda Knox. Amber Heard, say what you like about her, has around 50 times as many followers with 5.3 million followers, right? So it's 112,000 compared to 5.3 million. And that number seems to be steadily rising. The last time I went into Amber Heard's Instagram, she had 5.2 million followers. Shortly before that, she had just 5 million. So it's climbing. So I think the third aspect, if you're talking about should she, is if Amber's going to prevail in terms of paying for an appeal, that is to some extent going to depend on post-trial support. Does Amber Heard have post-trial support? Now, I think there's no doubt that she's got post-trial, there's like this post-trial toxic maelstrom, right? But at the same time, there is post-trial support. I don't know if you guys noticed just today, the hashtag I Stand With Amber Heard was trending, and it was trending above, it was trending for quite a lot of the day. I'm looking at a screen grab in front of me that has, this is fairly recent, in the last 24 hours, hashtag I Stand With Amber Heard, 15.8 thousand tweets, 15.8K tweets. And then there's hashtag Amber Heard is a liar, 12,200, right? So just showing you what's kind of been happening in the aftermath. So if you think about it, we are now at 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks after the verdict, and you've got hashtag I Stand With Amber Heard trending on Twitter. 3 weeks later. So if you ask, does Amber have support? The answer seems to be maybe not a lot as megastars go, right? If you think about the support Johnny Depp got, you might say it's not really very much. But she still has millions of fans, and I think that ought to be enough. As the publishers or potential publishers, they might say it's enough. This is worth so much, right? Now, for my part, I'm just telling you I'm just being honest with you. My side, I don't know if I would read a book by Amber Heard or Johnny Depp. If Johnny Depp had to release a book, I don't know if I would read it. But I am curious to see what would happen in an appeal. And my personal view is that she stands a good chance of prevailing, right? That's my personal view, and doesn't come from a vacuum. I'm going to provide you with some supporting evidence in a moment. I'm not saying she's got a good chance of prevailing because I'm Team Amber or because I'm not a Depp fan. It's because I recognize the legal merits of the case. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. So I'm going to put a brilliant source that tackled this particular subject. It's from Time, and it is titled, What Legal Experts Think of Amber Heard's Chances on Appeal. It was written on June 6, about a couple of days after the verdict. So I'm going to put this link in chat, but I'm going to kind of go through it, not exactly systematically. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm going to kind of refer to some of the things they say and then do some analysis there. So to start off with, one of the legal experts that they looked at was a guy called David Ring, a Los Angeles civil trial lawyer. And just in general terms, David Ring was describing an appeal as, quote, a long, expensive process. So if you know it's going to be a long ordeal and you know it's going to be expensive, you're going to need to sort of gird your loins. You're going to need to be committed. You're going to need to be invested. You're going to need to be sure this is what you really want, right? So the article goes on to say he and other experts estimated the appeal would take 2 years minimum. So if it's like a case of on your marks, get set, go, and the whole thing is in motion, and I think they've got 30 days to lodge an appeal, and assuming that they do, you might only get a conclusion to this case around about 2024. But that's also enough time, in theory, to get a book written and raise some dosh. Now, according to the article, several attorneys who spoke with Time speculated, and this is a quote from the article, quote, it will cost her hundreds of thousands of dollars in addition to the likely millions she's already spent in legal fees. And then you've got to ask, can you rationalize that? You've already spent millions, and you owe millions, you spent millions, and you owe millions. Is it worth spending additional millions, right? And this is where I think it's a reality. These megastars are in a reality that's not something that we can really imagine, really. It's like money is like conjured out of thin air. So, for example, if Amber Heard says, I want to write a book, suddenly millions are thrown at that idea. Whereas if you or I had to say that, if I had to say, hey, world, I'm going to write a book, I don't think I would get paid to write it. I don't think too many people would care. Hopefully a few would. I'm just saying that's a totally different reality. They say that and suddenly millions are thrown at them, right? And so losing millions to them isn't such a big deal as it would be to us. We don't have millions to begin with. Anyway, so Ring says, if you're facing a $15 million judgment, you certainly have to probably pursue that. And this is where it's kind of weird. This guy is David Ring is a Los Angeles civil trial lawyer, but kind of makes you wonder how much attention was he paying to the trial, because she doesn't owe 15 million. She owes, I suppose you could say 10.35 million. And I've heard that figure, that's the minimum figure that must be paid in order for the appeal to go forward. But what about the amount that Johnny owes her? So then it comes down to 8.35 million. 8.35 million is almost half of 15 million. So I don't know, I just find it quite funny that this guy says if you're facing a 15 million judgment, that's actually not what she's facing. So it kind of makes you wonder, have you been paying kind of enough attention to this case. How much do you know about this case? Anyway, the article goes on to say, quote, according to experts, there are a number of arguments. This is what we really want to get at. A number of arguments Heard's team could make. Her attorney, Elaine Bredehoft, made comments after the trial that would seem to suggest that she will focus on evidence. Now, what evidence will that be? She suggested that some pieces of evidence Depp was able to introduce were prejudicial, while certain evidence from Heard's team was suppressed at trial, including evidence that was permitted in the UK trial, but not the US one. Now, that's the first time, certainly in this live stream, that we're mentioning the UK trial. And we need to bring that up and talk about that in a little bit more detail, and we will. Now, as I understand it, Amber's comments to a therapist during the abuse phase of her marriage weren't allowed in the US trial. Anyway, I'm now going to refer to a different article that comes from The Independent. And the article title is, this is from just 3 days ago, Amber Heard News, actor says binder of evidence not allowed in Depp trial could have changed the verdict. A whole binder, so it suggests that there's quite a lot of information that didn't make it. Okay. So I've just put a link to that article. Paulette Lang says, I think very few people online and on TV were brave enough to say how they really felt about the trial for fear of losing viewers. Definitely. I wonder whether that's changing now. I wonder whether people are becoming more kind of courageous. Because certainly you're seeing some other hashtags coming up that weren't there before. Anyway, so according to this article in The Independent, according to the notes from this binder, Amber Heard told her therapist that Mr. Depp quote, hit her and threw her on the floor in an alleged incident in 2012. So there you've got something that's documented in a therapist's notes, right, in terms of that. And I think, without going into too much detail, I think this appears to be a reference to the very first incident when Amber Heard laughed at Johnny's Wino Forever tattoo, right? Then going a little bit further into the article, it says, Ms. Heard's team also shared text messages, including where she appeared to tell her father that Mr. Depp had kicked her on an airplane. Now, as far as I know, this is also in this binder that was suppressed. The notes and texts were not allowed as evidence in the case after the judge ruled them as inadmissible. Now, I don't know this for a fact. If I'm totally wrong, then just call me out on this. But I do know that some texts were presented on Dateline NBC. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off the sound here, if I can. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so as I say, I don't know whether these texts are what is being referred to, but Dateline NBC referred to the following texts, which I think were part of what was suppressed. As I say, if I'm wrong, you can call me out on that. So let me just read them. So these are obviously time-stamped texts with metadata. So the one is dated 2014, the 24th of May, 8:46 and 18 seconds p.m. And Amber Heard writes text, I keep not fighting back. He literally kicked me and called me and I think it's C-U-N-T, that part is taken out, in front of everyone on the plane. Then her next text is, it's humiliating. Now, I've got to say, if that's true, then surely all those passengers on the plane are witnesses. Then surely it's a slam dunk, right? That's just something that I find like quite odd. Like if something like that happened on the plane, how hard would it be to just get, a handful or even a dozen passengers on that flight and say, yes, I did see that happen. So anyway, that's the first text. Then there's another one dated, looks like 2015, the 16th of December, just after midnight. And Amber writes, Johnny did a number on me tonight. I'm safe and with support tonight, but I need some real help. Can I come tomorrow? I called earlier because I thought I had a concussion and didn't know if I should have called police. But I have a nurse close to me, and Rocky and her have been here for me. Can I see you tomorrow? So the relevance of these texts, you might say, oh, whatever. But the US judge may have done Amber a favor by keeping even a fraction of the evidence out, because any of the evidence kept out opens the door to appealing on the grounds of evidence that wasn't previously heard. So anywhere where the judges said, I'm not going to allow you to present that evidence, Amber can use that and say, but this evidence could have changed the outcome. And she could be right. She could have a point. And just in terms of thoroughness, the law might say, the justice system might say, let's test this. Let's take this hypothesis of this could have changed the outcome, and let's see whether it does play out. So another aspect that may allow the appeal to go ahead, again, remember, an appeal isn't a given. Amber's side have got to present a case for an appeal, and that's got to be accepted, is that the Depp versus Heard judge acted improperly. So just that on its own can be an argument, is you can argue that the judge mismanaged the trial, the judge acted in a prejudicial way or in a strange way. And I've got to say, that was my impression in a couple of respects. Maybe that doesn't really matter, but let's first deal with the legal merits according to this particular aspect in terms of the trial judge. So this is what the experts say, quote, this is according to David Ring, a civil trial attorney. He says, quote, this trial judge let in a lot of evidence in this case. I mean, a lot. I think things went kind of far afield from what the real issues were. So that's the basis for an appeal, though not necessarily a great basis for an appeal. So what he's kind of saying there is the judge allowed, he's saying the trial judge let in a lot of evidence. He let in a lot of rambling and discussion, right? Even though the case was being televised, despite the fact that the trial was being televised, and she kind of allowed the testimony to kind of go on and into so much detail. It wasn't sort of, let's deal with that incident, what are the facts, and keep it sort of kind of factual and keep it, boom, 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 and then move on to the next one. For Truth says a lot of rambling from Deb. Nisi says, I've never been able to get past those recordings. Not there yet. Says, I seriously hope she has a solid appeal foundation. Okay, so what about non-evidentiary rulings? And this brings us to another legal expert. This one is a professor at the University of Miami, the School of Law. Her name is Mary Ann Franks. And she says, she focuses on civil rights. And to me, this is actually the strongest argument. I don't know what you guys think. She says that, quote, Amber Heard's team might challenge the judge's decision just on this basis to allow the trial to be live streamed, right? So just the fact that the trial was live streamed could be sufficient basis to say it was prejudicial, just that. Mary Ann Franks goes on to say that that decision was a particularly unusual decision given that the case involved allegations of SA and DV, and that is absolutely true. It was a particularly unusual decision given that. And then she goes on to say, not only was that a very strange decision, like you wouldn't imagine every judge would do that, but also the judge's decision not to sequester the jury, which then resulted by a trial by social media. Whether you say it was a trial by social media in terms of the jury, the fact is it was a trial by social media. That is a fact. And that has been prejudicial to Amber Heard. And that definitely starts to push that needle in terms of the judge's decision-making and the, what's the word, was she acting sensibly? Was the judge's decision-making sensible and reasonable and fair and right? The answer is question mark. Was it? And that is what they will decide in their appeal. Are they going to decide that it was? As Karate did remind the jury over and over again to not watch news about the trial at night, right? So she says, we're going to televise this trial. We're going to not sequester the jury. But then every single day you've got to remind the jury again and again and again, don't watch the news about the trial at night. But now you've created a monster already. So the article goes on to say, even logging onto Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, if you just logged onto it, if you just innocently were logging onto it, and I think what needs to be added here is YouTube, that could lead jurors to memes, to recommended things based on algorithms about the case. And they say here, quote, including unfounded allegations that Heard faked bruises and persuaded witnesses to lie, end quote. So if you're seeing things like that, like it's sort of headlines, even if you're not reading it, that's going to have an impact on you. Oh, the bruises are faked. Oh, that's what the public thinks. That's what America thinks. And it is unfounded, those allegations, but it's going to sow a seed in the jury's mind. So let me ask you a question. What is more outlandish? To believe some or all of the jurors did go onto social media and were influenced, or that they weren't? And before I continue, I want you guys to respond to that. Do you believe that some or all of the jurors did go onto social media and were influenced, or that they weren't? Which is the more outlandish thing, do you think? That if you think that it's more outlandish to say that they weren't influenced by social media. In other words, it's crazy. It's more outlandish to say that the jurors weren't influenced by social media, put a 1. And if you think it's more outlandish to say some or all of the jurors did go into social media, that's more outlandish, then put a 2. I'll put this question in chat. Ricardo Ortiz said, Amber said she wrote the op-ed to get back at the wall of backers. That Kahali Tatlock says, of course they saw things said on social media. Well, it does seem pretty obvious. Brianna says, were they forbidden from all social media? Well, they were told not to go into social media, but no one's going to necessarily stop them. And think about it, if you go home, you might say, you know, I'm not going to research this trial, but then it might be on your news feed. It might be, the hashtag may be trending on Twitter. You might open your Twitter like I was, and then the hashtag is just there and it's constantly there. Okay, so thanks for your responses there. So there's another lawyer, her surname is Sullivan. Just trying to see what her name is. Rebecca Sullivan, she's a Washington, D.C. attorney focusing on family law. She says the following. She says, quote, I actually think that's a pretty good argument, meaning that it was this trial by social media. She says, quote, what is so extraordinary about this trial is the social media and news coverage of it, kind of a circus of public opinion, with this case, you have your jury going home. Their families have certainly been following this. They see the TikToks and the tweets, and the unsequestered jury is being exposed to things that were not admissible in the trial. So to the extent that Heard's lawyers can argue they were influenced by outside factors that weren't admitted in trial, that actually has a pretty high likelihood of success, in my opinion. And I must say, I concur with that 100%. Like, I would just say that, to me, is absolutely idiosyncratic about this trial and damaging. And so surely she will get if on nothing else, she should secure an appeal just on that. So she says that actually has a pretty high likelihood of success. Now, I think a lot of people laughed at Amber Heard's lawyer when she said something similar, like, the jurors went home and whatever. Everyone laughed and said, oh, that's silly. Yeah, you've got a completely, neutral lawyer saying exactly the same thing. And I tend to agree with that. I concur, Councillor, I concur. I think the best argument for an appeal for the trial by TikTok is for it to be heard behind doors, not on TikTok. And the amazing thing is, an appeal is a very different ballgame to a jury trial. And that's something I also want to talk about more now. So according to Time, and this, I don't know if you guys know what an appeal involves. We're going to deal with that right now. According to Time, quote, on appeal, there would be no cameras, no opportunity for Heard's testimony to be picked apart, edited, misconstrued on social media. You would have three appellate judges in the Virginia Court of Appeals who would decide the case largely by sifting through documents written by attorneys for either side. So you literally have them examining the legal merits. They don't care what Johnny Depp looks like. They don't care if he's smiling, if he's chewing gum. They don't care how cute he is. They don't care about Amber Heard either. They don't care what she's wearing. They don't care how many movies Johnny Depp has acted in. What they're going to look at is purely the documents in a very dry, legalistic way. And that is exactly what I think this court needs. Let's just have a look at some of your comments. Paulette says, watch the full trial too and study trial that he lost. Becca says they had placards outside with Amber hate memes on. Yeah, that's also true, is that when they leave the court, they're also seeing what's abundantly obvious from the public outside. That's also being communicated. I don't know if they would see that if they were sequestrated. I don't know. Marcel van Skyke says they could then have also looked at what happened in England, in the England trial. That would have put them on Amber's side. Interesting point. We're going to deal with that in a moment. Sugirl ABK says, I was a victim of DV. My mother took photos of all the cuts and bruises. To this day, I cannot look at them. Sorry to hear that. Sugirl, what did you think of Amber's injuries? When you looked at them, did you say that's not real? Or what did you think of that? What was your first thought? Jody School says, definitely wrong decision to televise. Orla Dark says it was a popularity contest, like Nick highlighted in another stream. Jury talked about emotions, not about evidence. Sarah Wolseley, you can turn it all off. It's simple. Read a book, cook, garden. Well, it's simple for some people. Brianna says Amber's side didn't want cameras. For Truth says it was heartbreaking to hear Amber getting booed every day and walking into court. Okay, so let's go on. So I think there are also other aspects of the judge's management of her courtroom that may be at issue. These are just my personal thoughts, and some of you are going to feel like, wow, I really don't like that. Well, all you need to do is just kind of shoot me down and be as unpleasant as you want to be. But I thought that I thought that the judge ought to have addressed Camille Vasquez's what I thought was overly aggressive, almost badgering tone when cross-examining Amber. To me, it was bordering on unprofessional. I think she could have just said to her, look, bring it down a notch. You don't need to be this, I don't know what the word is, nasty. Ask her questions, get the answer, but it doesn't need to be this antagonistic. And you might say, no, she was a great lawyer and her tone was absolutely appropriate. From my experience, there's a basic decorum in court where counsel, I'm talking about the lawyers, counsel aren't supposed to be sarcastic, counsel aren't supposed to make jokes or laugh, and neither are the people that are being, the witnesses and so on. You're supposed to communicate your story and that's it. And then it gets, you take what is being said and then you find the legal case out of that, right? You are supposed to try and keep the emotions out of it. So Johnny's snarky responses to Rottenborn, I think, also got a free pass again and again. And I was quite surprised that the judge just let that pass. So that's another thing that I thought was a bit strange. And then there were a couple of instances where Amber would answer beyond what Camille Vasquez was saying. And I think that was also important to sort of say, just answer the question, please. But that would then relate to both of them, to Amber and Johnny. In other words, keep your answers concise and to the point of the question. Because Johnny rambled quite a lot as well. I saw someone who I think was a Johnny Depp supporter saying, Johnny rambled on so much that I kind of stopped watching and I went to kind of a lawyer's YouTube or whatever to find out what they were saying because I couldn't actually make sense of it. It was just sort of like, and I thought that kind of spoke volumes. If you've got to go away from the trial to figure out what's going on, I don't know whether the trial is doing a very good job of being a trial. Then my final gripe with the judge is that did she not notice the jury sleeping? So it's almost like a teacher in a classroom. Your job is to make sure that people are paying attention. If anything, it's even more important. I mean, where can it be more important that people are awake and alert and paying attention than in a courtroom, right? Like at school, a teacher will say, hey, don't sleep, pay attention. Where can it be more important where someone's life and their fortune and everything is going to be decided and you are nodding off and the judge doesn't even seem to notice that? The judge is like the teacher in a classroom and she doesn't seem to notice the jury sleeping. And I don't know, was there a case where the judge said, hey, can someone wake that person up, right? So we know the stenographer saw jury members nodding off. Why didn't the judge? Did the judge not see them or the judge just not do anything about it? Either is not a really good look. Now, I don't know if I missed something. Maybe the judge did say that. I just never remember it coming up. But I think that's quite an important aspect as well. Time also notes, this is the other side. So you might say she got quite a good case. The appeal is a totally different ball game. Tick, 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 tick. But this article in Time magazine also notes that an appeal isn't a slam dunk. You're not going to appeal and it's then just, a yellow brick road. They go on to say, quote, the jury seemed to find Depp's story more credible than Heard's. And experts agreed, all these legal experts they spoke to said, appellate courts tend to be reluctant to reassess credibility judgments. So the fact that the jury, sleeping or not, decided that they believed Johnny Depp and they didn't believe Amber Heard, appellate courts tend to not really want to deal with that. They don't want to say, look, we're going to overrule the jury on this. And then this part is really interesting in the article. They say, even if this jury's conclusions seem contradictory, to me, that's quite a big statement to say, you know what, the experts, these legal experts say, appellate courts tend to be reluctant to reassess credibility, even if the jury's conclusion is contradictory. Now, my gut response to the jury's judgment was that it was contradictory. I don't know what you guys thought. How can you find in both parties' favor in a defamation case? How can you seem to invoke mutual abuse where mutual abuse is destructive to the legal argument that there was no abuse on one side? So it's good to see this confirmed for me. It's just good to see this confirmed by legal experts in what I think is a credible publication like Time. But even if appellate courts are typically reluctant, this is just my view. I did study law. I'm not a practicing lawyer by any means, but in my view, I think Heard's team ought to give it a shot anyway. They ought to ask the appellate courts to reassess the credibility judgments made by this jury. They may normally be reluctant to do that, but I think they should be asked to do that. So I think Heard's team ought to give that a shot, not just the verdict, but the errors in the verdict itself and the speed at which they went back to calculate the settlement amounts, which I think ended up being a matter of minutes. It was like, oh, you need to actually put the amounts that you're going to, okay, we'll go back, okay. And then they came back a couple of minutes later. And then they got the punitive damage amount wrong. The jury got the punitive damage amount wrong by over $4.5 million. But still, even so, an appeal can be a challenge. So going back to the Time article, it says, quote, anyone appealing as an uphill battle, that's according to Rebecca Sullivan. She says most likely the lawyers, most likely Heard's team will argue some legal error was made during the trial and will try to overturn the verdict on the basis that the jury was influenced by things they saw and heard outside the courtroom. I really think that that is a winnable basis. I really think that is a winnable basis. Before the appeals process even begins, it's likely that Amber Heard or her insurance company will have to put up some sort of bond that shows she has or can raise the money that she owes Depp. So she doesn't necessarily have to have the money. She doesn't necessarily have to put the money down. She can say, I've got a book deal. Here's the contract. It's for $10 million. I'll be good for it. The book should be delivered in whatever, 6 months, a year, whatever. ... In other words, that serves as a kind of surety. Does that make sense? And so I say that may be where the book deal comes in. You might say Heard's ability to post the bond is not guaranteed. And Heard's own lawyers have said that this trial has been a financial burden for her, but the book deal may change everything. And then there's also another side to this. She might, let's say she gets $5 million from a book deal. She might get another $5 million from another source, right? That other source might be someone that Johnny referred to in a text as Mollusk. I don't know if you guys remember reading that. Mollusk is a former boyfriend who happens to be the world's wealthiest man. Do you know who Mollusk is? In Johnny's text, he talks about Mollusk giving Amber, quote, some shitty lawyers. And so the question is, might Elon do so again? I don't know whether he did, but if he did, might he do it again? Is he still sympathetic to Amber's cause? I'd really like to read this particular text, but it's so kind of filthy that I would need to not read every second or third word. So we now up to almost 70% of you saying Amber Heard shouldn't appeal. Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. Dr. Spiegel was a legend. I loved his eccentric psychiatric style. I'm not sure if I loved it that much. Haley says he got so much hate. He did. He wrote an article about that. I'm not sure if you saw. He wrote an article in Newsweek. Rika Recht says Elon is on the fence these days, unfortunately. Well, I think he's outwardly on the fence. I don't know what he really thinks about this. One would imagine his own public relations are trying to keep the appearance of him being neutral, I would imagine. For Truth says, I think there's a lot of Deb supporters voting in your poll. I think so. Becca says, he made me smile and reminded me of my dad. Okay. Sue Girl says, Amber didn't show any dark bruising at all. Her red cheek looked like she just had her implant put in. Okay. She didn't believe the injuries. For Truth says, agree, Nick, they had no idea how to complete the form or that they had to award an amount. Yeah. Certainly didn't reflect, I thought, terribly well on them. Okay, so the bottom line is that I think Amber Heard's odds of winning an appeal are good, precisely because there won't be a jury of ignoramuses snoozing through the legal technicalities or fixating on Johnny's doodles. Instead, you'll have legally qualified individuals handling the legal merits, just as occurred in the UK trial where a judge decided the matter. So if you go back to the poll, and the poll is, should Amber appeal? If your answer is, well, I think her chances of winning are good, then I think the answer becomes yes. So it looks like 70% think she shouldn't appeal. I don't know if that's because you think that she could win or because you don't want her to win. But if you voted no, is it because you don't want her to win or you think she doesn't have a case? Because these legal experts have just said it looks like she does have a case. So going back to the article from Time, it says, her team have a better chance in front of an appeals court than the jury of 5 men and 2 women. The trial was televised live, jurors were not sequestered, and videos and memes of Depp and Heard on the witness stand, including overwhelmingly pro-Depp commentary, were inescapable on social media platforms like TikTok. I mean, we all know that. And so the article kind of sums up the whole thing by saying, quote, I would expect the appellate portion of the case where the audience is judges to focus more on legal arguments and a lot less on the theatrics that we saw in the trial where the audience was a jury. And I think a lot of these theatrics that she's talking about were also theatrics outside of the courtroom, theatrics on social media. So all of that theater, all of that noise is gone. And I think that will benefit Amber Heard. In terms of this, David Ring agreed, saying the whole trial was a spectacle. And that is why I think you've got this distorted or distortions during the trial. So if you think my arguments are bogus or stupid or silly or wrong, or you disagree with them in terms of what I've just said, if you think they're biased, well, you'll find NBC News as more of what you're looking for. They've got an article, Amber Heard faces uphill climb, long shot in appeal, legal experts say, they're almost kind of saying she shouldn't appeal. There's no way she's going to win. So, you can go to Time and get one opinion, one legal opinion, and you can go onto another source and get another legal opinion. And the question is, which one is better informed? Which one is better informed? Sharon, good to see you here. Michelle says, okay, so I'm really interested in hearing whether people supporting Heard listen to her testimony. Okay, I can see where that's going to go. Okay, so Sugal ABK says, so don't think it should be televised. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next aspect that I want to talk about, and you might not actually like the title here. Some of you might be offended by this sort of subtitle. And the subtitle is, How Did Amber Lose Such a Winnable Case? So to me, the idea of her appealing makes sense because she should have won the original case in the first place. Of course, if your opinion is she's a liar and I didn't believe anything, then you'd also automatically say, well, there's no way she should appeal. She should have lost and she'll lose again. So we might be really far apart in terms of that. I don't know if we are, but I want to put up an excellent article. I really don't have time to read the whole thing here. It's a fantastic article. I'm not sure if it's a blog or what it is, but it's written by a guy called Michael Hobbs, and it's in a publication called The Present Age, and it's sort of subtitled How a Washed Up Celebrity, Men's Rights Activist and True Crime Stands Convinced Millions of Americans to buy into a conspiracy theory. Thanks a lot, Ricardo Ortiz. So remember I said kind of at the beginning of this live, I said what seems to have happened here is Johnny's reality has become everyone's reality, right? And is that reality? Is Johnny's reality, right? And if Johnny's reality has become everyone's reality, what does that say about you and your attitude and your understanding and your standards when it comes to reality, right? This article is talking about what, obviously in not a very kind way, this is how a washed-up celebrity convinced millions of Americans to buy into a conspiracy theory. He's saying, anyway, we'll deal with what that conspiracy theory is, that all of this from Amber's side was a conspiracy in order to further her own career. Okay, so, yeah, by the way, if you want to contribute a super chat, you're more than welcome. Ricardo just has. If you're watching this live on replay and you want to hit the thanks button, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, so how did Amber lose such a winnable case? So this particular journalist writes 2 words: jury trial. What's the mystery around how Amber lost such a winnable case? And he says 2 words: jury trial. I'm going to talk about why I think it was such a winnable case to begin with, but I'm going to do that after we go through this. So I'd love to go through this article in a lot of detail. If you are looking at this on your desktop, make sure to copy that link I've just provided and keep it somewhere and read this on your own time. But I'm going to provide some of the highlights of this. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Thanks a lot. Love this topic. I'm going to provide some highlights from Michael Hobbs' article, which is titled The Bleak Spectacle of the Amber Heard Johnny Depp Trial. So he says, Amber Heard's story is remarkably unremarkable. He goes on to say, every beat of her narrative, the honeymoon period, the relentless escalations, the day 1 apologies followed by day 2 denials, follows well-established patterns of interpersonal violence. So that's just one thing I've highlighted. Then if you just scroll down a bit further, he talks about the most convincing evidence is the big picture. So he's saying here, if you look at the little pieces of the puzzle, you look at the details, actually the most convincing thing is the whole mosaic. And it's quite an interesting point he makes. He says, even if Heard didn't have an Everest of supporting evidence, and I thought that she did, I thought that she did have a mountain of evidence. Whether you say, I don't believe the mountain of evidence, there's nevertheless a mountain that is being pushed onto the table, right? And you can say, well, I don't think any of that's credible. Okay, well, then take it off the table. Nevertheless, a mountain is profit, right? But anyway, he says, even if Amber didn't have an Everest of supporting evidence, even if this was a he said, she said case, her account should be treated as plausible on its face. It's quite a big statement. Why does he say that? Then he says, Heard's big picture account of the facts makes sense. Depp's doesn't. Now think about what he's saying there. He's saying Heard's got like this big picture account, so the overarching narrative, and he's saying that account makes sense, whereas Johnny Depp's overarching narrative, what is Johnny Depp's, what's like the full story? What is the story behind the story that Depp gives? And does that make sense? Now listen to what he says here. Really interesting way of almost like psychologically analyzing it from a narrative perspective. So he writes the following, quote, "From the inception of his legal attack on his ex-wife, Depp has claimed that she engaged in a calculated, premeditated, years-long project to destroy his life." So it's like, this woman wants to destroy my life, and she wants to sort of step onto my back and onto my shoulders and then jump and use me as a platform to get to better herself. And I think a lot of people believe it. That is the conspiracy that he's trying to sell, I think, to the American public. And it looks like most of the American public believe that, right? So he's saying that this whole thing was a calculated, premeditated, years-long project to destroy his life. In other words, a hoax. It's all manufactured. None of it's true. Then he goes on to say, a text to a friend after she filed for divorce reads, and this is from Johnny, that C-U-N-T ruined such a effing cool life we had for a while, right? And then slightly more politely, but no more convincingly, his legal filing for the Virginia case says her allegations are, quote, an elaborate hoax to generate positive publicity for Amber Heard and advance her career, right? Then he goes on to say, quote, Depp's account of events doesn't hold up to the slightest scrutiny. Heard's first text messages to friends and family alleging mistreatment were from 2013, 2 years before she even married Depp, much less divorced him. And I think that's quite a good point. Was she really like coming up with this elaborate thing? I don't know. Did she know that she was going to marry him? Was she plotting to marry him, kind of thing? Did she ask him to marry her, or did he ask her to marry him? You know. And now I want to refer to something that comes from the the UK trial that was not allowed in the US trial. And I think it's an email written from Amber to Johnny. So it's an email that the American judge didn't allow. She writes the following. Not actually sure of the date of this. Amber, this is Amber's email to Johnny Depp. You actually trick yourself into thinking the craziest lies when you're effed up. And because you're so accustomed to people not calling you out on your BS, they work for you, hello, that you actually believe your SHIT. Need a reference? How about when you actually thought I hit you first, or that I was hiding drugs? The list goes on. Admit some of your own SHIT first. Many times you have hurt me, physically and emotionally, from the things you say and did while effed up. The monster comes out, and when you become mean and horrible, the monster comes out and you become mean and horrible, the opposite of why I love you, and what I am to do. I think it's, and what am I to do? How would you be if you were in love with one person who was in fact two? Both you, the love of my life, and the monster look the same. How effing confused I feel. I am mad, so mad. How would you feel if you were sold false goods? Question mark, question mark. I fell for you while you were sober a whole year. How could I know this lay in store for me? How dare you make me fall in love with you, present this other self, your good half, only to rip the mask off once I was in? Question mark, exclamation mark. So what she's talking about in this email, and this is, you might say, what went into the UK trial and didn't go into the US trial, well, this email, for example. So is she writing an email that's also fake? Is she fake writing an email to Johnny Depp, kind of thing? But she's kind of talking about two Johnnies. She's talking about the Johnny that's sober and the Johnny that she fell in love with, and the Johnny that she describes as his good half, and then that he rips this mask off once she's kind of officially married to him, right? Anyway, this article in the present age goes on to say, quote, for his narrative to align with the available evidence, Amber Heard would have had to convince numerous friends, ex-friends, professional contacts, and neighbors to lie numerous times under oath for years, all while leaving no trace of her diabolical plan in the form of texts or emails. At the most basic level, the accusation that Heard did all this to advance her own career doesn't make sense. In general, women do not benefit from accusing powerful men of DV. More specifically, consider Heard's actions following her split from Depp. She filed for divorce in May 2016, then made the allegations and filed for a restraining order shortly afterwards. And then he goes on to describe them not having a prenuptial agreement, which meant that she was actually entitled to millions. And regardless of whether she was abused or not, she was actually entitled to millions in terms of the divorce. And then she dropped her claim for ongoing support and took a lot less than she was entitled to. You do kind of get the feeling that she was trying to move on with her life. She was trying to put it behind her. As part of the settlement, she apparently withdrew the abuse allegations, signed an NDA, and co-signed a vague, anodyne statement that the relationship had been volatile, but that there was never an intent of physical or emotional harm. And then, this is according to the article, and then for years, nothing. She made a few oblique references to a relationship. All of what this is getting at is saying, is Amber, does she have some kind of vendetta against him? Does she have some kind of agenda? Does she have some kind of, is she trying to get Johnny? Is she trying to undermine him? Or is she trying to throw him under the bus? And what he's trying to get at here is that she signs this NDA and withdraws a lot of this stuff because she's trying to put it behind her. She's not trying to emphasize it. She's not trying to make a big deal of it. And then many years go by, nothing happens. And then she makes a few oblique references to her relationship as part of her advocacy around #MeToo. This is from the article. And I think that probably worried Johnny Depp, given what was happening to other people, Harvey Weinstein and so on. That probably kind of concerned him. The whole Me Too movement is like, whoa, this could, right? If Johnny had done something wrong, is the Me Too movement going to be something that's going to affect him, right? But the thing is, she never provided any details. Then he goes on to write, again, this is from the present age. I'll put a link to this in the description, in the chat again, just in case you missed it. I see, should Amber Heard appeal is up to 69%. Baby Boss says she's the jealous one. She didn't like it that Johnny was texting another woman. Okay. He goes on to write, quote, I find it difficult to believe that Heard spent years fabricating texts and photos only to get a modest divorce settlement to which she was already entitled, then stay silent for more than a year. And then he goes on to say that this is the part that I really don't understand. If you're saying she faked the bruises and she faked the damage, then you say, why wouldn't you make it a lot worse if you were faking it? So, in other words, you're showing a bruise and it's fake. Why wouldn't you emphasize it far, far more? If you're trying to show that the place is trashed and you're going to photograph it, you can kind of go ballistic. You can tear things up and you can really make it look a lot worse. So the one argument is that Her story is that it's very exaggerated and it's a lot worse than it really is, right? But the other side is, if she's manufacturing evidence and if the evidence isn't real, then she's got the opportunity to make things as terrible as she wants to. So why doesn't it look that terrible if that's what she's doing? So he goes on to say, Heard's actions make no sense as a scheming black widow. As an abuse victim, however, they align internally with all external evidence. The trial was a nationwide tutorial on how to blame victims. And then this part's quite interesting. It's going a little bit further down the article. It says, quote, there's almost no evidence that the op-ed had any effect on Depp's career. Over the previous decade, Depp had released a string of high-profile bombs. The Rum Diary, Alice Through the Looking Glass, Transcendence, The Lone Ranger, Mordecai, Dark Shadows. And the writer says, I haven't even heard of most of these movies. And he says, Johnny Depp had been the subject of numerous articles documenting his dimming star power. So there have been a lot of other articles just talking about it in general. I don't know if you guys know about this, but there were definitely a lot of articles I came across, like in 2018, in the Rolling Stones and so on. Quite a few articles, and they seem to say a hell of a lot more. Anyway, it goes on to say, for years, set leakers reported that he showed up late and drunk and needed an earpiece to remember his lines. But Johnny says he used it to listen to music. That's again recasting reality. He's not impaired in any way. He's fully prepared, and so he's listening to music is not. It's not a case that he can't remember his lines. Again, it's Johnny's reality becomes your reality, but what is the actual reality? Remember I said early on, my sister went to a place to order a burger, and she asked, can I get a cheese and bacon burger? And the guy looked at her and said, we only have bacon and cheeseburger. And it's just like, what reality are you in, dude? Like, you need to kind of adjust your reality. You need to think out of your box kind of thing. Anyway, he concludes by saying, Amber Heard is now one of the most hated figures in America. Even if she overturns the decision on appeal, she will likely never be cast in a major Hollywood role again. What studio wants to risk a hostile internet campaign before they even start shooting? And I must say I disagree with that. I think memories are short. I think opprobrium is also very facile these days. Time moves at a blistering pace and people change their mind very, very quickly, kind of on a whim. I'm not saying that she isn't one of the most hated figures in America, but I do think things can change. And I do think she's got youth on her side, and possibly, I mean, if she wins this appeal, she will then have kind of the law on her side, and that might change things a little bit. The other side is that Hollywood might, in a way, take her under their wing. They might say, Hollywood might feel that they want to do something. I don't know. Maybe they won't. Maybe Hollywood's shallow in that sense. But you might have other actors rallying to support her. You might have quite a few things that could happen. I think a big thing that supports Amber or that helps Amber is that she's extraordinarily beautiful. I think that helps her chances of resurrection. Plus the fact that she's still quite young. Of course, you can't have too many years go by with appeal and all of this nonsense. Then that's not going to be such a big factor. Okay. Yvonne says the photos did not match the description. She said she took, though. It gives one pause. Bruce says Johnny spent £50,000 on a celebratory meal here in the UK. I don't know if that meal happened before. I don't know if that was like a celebratory meal. I think I saw that on a Daily Mail article, and then they took that down. So it would seem to me that I'm not sure if that was. I think it was just a meal. Maybe it was celebratory. I don't know. Mods, just have a look at some of the comments made in chat. Just make sure that they are on board. HI says, I don't want to see any other actress in the Aquaman role. That's her part. That's her part. Okay. Well, that's another rumor that raced around the world only for it to be not credible. Okay, so let's keep going. So I now want to refer you to a question or a comment that I get quite often, that the UK trial was nothing like the US trial, or Amber didn't win the UK trial. So if you agree with that, so if you say the UK trial was nothing like the US trial, or Amber didn't win the UK trial, if you agree with that, put a 1. If you feel like actually the UK trial was about pretty much the same thing, put a 2. Let's see what you guys say. Let me say it again. The UK trial was nothing like the US trial. If you agree with that, put a 1. If you don't, put a 2. Let's see what you guys say. So far, only 2s. There's a 1. There's a 1. Louise says, some people are incapable of understanding how their behavior impacts other people. So quite a few 2s, a couple of 1s, also quite a few 1s, looks like. Thanks, Sharon and Nisi. They're just saying, please be careful not to comment with words that YouTube doesn't like. Please watch words in chat, use DV, etc. A couple of 1s there. Interesting, a 1 from Sharon, okay. David says, factually the same, procedurally completely different. Good point. Not there yet. Says, Johnny was helped out of his UK hotel, okay. Okay, so For Truth says UK got it right. Orla Dog says it was all about whether, okay. So I'm going to read a email that was sent to me, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll read about a quarter of it because it really was a long email. And then I'm going to provide my feedback. So it's quite on the chin. I'm not going to say who it was, but she writes, a message as you seem confused about the different court cases and their impact on each other. You have told a woman who posted a comment on one of your YouTube videos that she did not have a clue what she was talking about after she posted that the 2 trials were different and that Amber had not won in the London case. The woman was correct and deserves your apology, and below is the information that you seem to lack. The UK case was a completely different case because Amber was a third party to it, which meant that most of the evidence that Johnny had against Amber that he was able to give in the American trial was inadmissible due to third-party privilege. You honestly know very, very little about the machinations of the court. A barrister called, and then she refers to another YouTuber, will explain it to you. If you look this up, he goes through the entire UK judgment, all of it, and shows you all the evidence that was not allowed to be presented by Johnny Depp due to Amber not being a party to the case. It was between the Sun and Johnny Depp. Amber did not win anything in the UK trial. She was not a party to the claim. Stop saying in your videos that she won. She did not. Here I will explain further. And then she goes on. In paragraph 576 of the judge's judgment of the UK case, he states the following. At several times in the course of this litigation, Mr. Sherborne, that's Johnny Depp's lawyer for the UK case, has suggested that there was unfairness to the claimant, blah, blah, blah. And so you've got a very indignant person who's saying, well, the UK case is absolutely nothing like the US case. You don't understand anything about the law, and this YouTuber, you need to go to him, and he knows absolutely everything, and he's going through the entire UK judgment, and then she starts referring to case law, whatever, and of course she talks about statements by Johnny Depp's lawyer, kind of thing. So this is my response to that, and it's a very bland, sort of casual, simple response. I'm not going into a lot of detail. Johnny sued for defamation on the accusation of being a wife beater. That's what he sued about. He was accused of being a wife beater. Johnny sued for defamation. That's what's similar in both cases. Amber testified to the same assaults in the UK trial as she did in Virginia. A UK judge found her testimony to be substantially true. A UK judge believed her. A US jury apparently didn't believe anything she said, as you don't, as the person who wrote this. If you asked Amber if Johnny losing that trial was a victory for her, if you had to ask Amber, the fact that Johnny lost this trial against the son, was that a victory for you? I mean, you testified as a third party, but for the son, was that a victory for your version of events? I think she would say yes. Did you hear what she said? This is what I wrote to her. Did you hear what she said immediately after that trial was concluded when she was standing outside the building? And then just as a kind of a postscript, I said, you seem to be unaware that Johnny appealed in the UK. He lost the case, he appealed it, and then he lost that too. So there are a couple of things that I think are maybe pertinent from the, if you want to talk about the UK trial, you can refer to some of the documents in the trial. Here are a few excerpts. There were various occasions, this is just reading from the case documents. There were various occasions on which the claimant denied matters which he was then forced to concede in cross-examination were true. Here the claimant is Johnny Depp. And here they give a couple of examples. In cross-examination, he, that's Johnny Depp, conceded that he had headbutted Miss Heard on 15 December 2015, albeit accidentally. Let me read that again. On cross-examination, he, that's Johnny Depp, conceded that he had headbutted Miss Heard on 15 December 2015, albeit accidentally, something he had until that point always denied. This is dealt with in detail below. Next point, he claimed not to remember his highly distinctive skull and crossbones, property of JD drugs box, that's certain item of evidence, only to recall it when shown a picture of it. And then it comes up in another exhibit number. When confronted with his own text messages, he accepted having described Ms. Heard as a lesbian camp counselor, despite initially claiming, I've never uttered those words. Goes on to say, this is all from the UK judgment. Johnny was also unable to recall events which for most people would be memorable. He could not recall an incident in May 2013 when he cut his hand seriously enough that he thought he may require stitches. The incident was recorded in text the claimant sent to Mr. Duters. Number 9. Further, this is just quoting from the, I think the judgment. Further, he tailored his testimony when confronted with unfavorable evidence. Tailored means changed, altered, adapted. In relation to the 24 May 2014 Boston LA flight recording, all of this is from the UK trial. Does any of this sound familiar? In relation to the 24 May 2014 Boston LA flight recording, having initially said it may not have been a recording of him at all, in re-examination, he claimed to have recalled that in fact it was of him, but was recorded on an entirely different occasion many months later in the Bahamas. The new recollection was, however, false. The metadata shows it was indeed recorded on that flight. The matter is dealt with in detail below. Number 10, there's no dispute that the claimant was, during the that the claimant was, during the relationship with Ms. Heard, a very heavy user of controlled and prescription drugs. Is that in dispute? Let me read that again. There is no dispute that the claimant was, during the relationship with Ms. Heard, a very heavy user of controlled and prescription drugs, as well as being a heavy drinker, save certain limited periods of sobriety. The question for the court is whether his use of drugs or alcohol prompted him to become abusive and violent on occasions, and whether it affected his ability to recall events that had taken place when under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Number 11, does that ring a bell? Like, we're talking about this in the UK case. Does it have any applicability with the US case? No, they're completely different. The claimant has been a regular user of illegal drugs since his early teenage years. Hunter S. Thompson, Keith Richards, both famous for their use of drugs, are idols. And then this is just a separate part from the court documents dealing with the claimant's reliability, in other words, Johnny Depp's reliability. It says, the claimant was not a reliable witness. He conceded that he had never read his whole witness statement. When challenged about the headbutting on the 15th December 2015 and asked why his new account that he had headbutted Miss Heard, albeit accidentally, was missing from the statement, the claimant confirmed that he had not read the entirety of his witness statement before signing it. He said, and this is quoting his words, "Had I read the entire statement after the lawyers had drafted it, I would have found that missing piece. I did not read all of these things as it was just altogether too much information, and I trusted that my attorneys had taken my statement and put it on the record." And then, question, did you read the witness statement before signing it? Answer, I am sure that I read some of it. I do not know that I read it all. I cannot say that I read it all. I am sorry. I trusted my attorneys. Okay, number 5, his memory of events was demonstrated to be wrong or on other occasions incomplete. This was no doubt in part because of the blackouts he explained that he had. He accepted in relation to the Bahamas Island incident in August 2014. These are again Johnny Depp's words. He said, there were blackouts for sure, but in any blackout, there are snippets of memory. And in recalling these memories, you see images that you saw and images that you went through, but you do not see the whole picture. So I don't know, when I think about blackouts, and of course, it's maybe not fair to say this because this is a civil trial, but I think about blackouts, I think about what O.J. Simpson said in his book, If I Did It. He kind of is in a situation where he's facing Nicole Brown and then he seems to kind of black out. He sort of just has like a memory wipe. You have the same with Jodi Arias, where she has this sort of memory fog come over her conveniently. It's like, oh, no, I don't remember this, but I remember that. Anyway, I see the blackouts as it kind of works two ways. You can be so under the influence that you've got no idea what's going on and you're harmlessly lying on a bed or passed out somewhere. On the other hand, you could be acting in a totally unacceptable manner and you wouldn't know that either, right? Then another reference is, similarly, in relation to the Boston flight incident on 24 May 2014, he conceded under cross-examination that he was incorrect in his statement that he had not taken cocaine and things of that nature, and that he had some memories of the flight, but that apparently parts of the flight are blacked out. Number 7, there are various occasions on which the claimant denied matters which was then forced to concede in cross-examination were true. In cross-examination, he conceded that he had, okay, so I think I've dealt with this. Yeah, I've dealt with that. Okay, so now I want to bring up kind of almost like being a devil's advocate. I want to bring up the question, why isn't Johnny Depp suing Amber Heard again? Because she apparently went on to she gave an interview and people are saying, well, she's defamed him all over again. So why doesn't he sue all over again. Now, what I found quite interesting is Johnny Depp said at one point, I've been waiting 4 years or however long it was. I've been waiting for years to have my moment to tell my story. Then he's not even in court when the verdict comes out. It doesn't seem like he's even given a statement. His lawyers have given statements on his behalf, but he hasn't really said anything. Amber's given interviews, he hasn't. Amber's, I guess, continued, according to certain people, continued to defame him. So why not sue her again? And so you had someone, I'm not going to say her name because she might be offended, but it's a YouTuber whose name starts with E. And she quoted Amber saying, I spoke it to power, meaning truth to power, and I paid the price. And this particular person said, that sounds a lot like, then 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing basically DV, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath. And then she said, I'm waiting to see a motion for injunction. What I think a lot of these people are missing, because I saw a lot of channels saying, almost like rubbing their hands, saying, Johnny, sue her again. Johnny, you can sue her again. I saw quite a few legal channels saying that. And it's like, if it's true that, or put it this way, if she's lied about absolutely everything, then you can sue her again if she's lied about absolutely everything. If not, then you're taking a risk doing that, because you've lost another trial. You've lost the UK trial and you lost the appeal. And one could argue, should you have won the trial in the US? And I mean, the appeal is going to decide that. And that then brings us to another fantastic article in the New Yorker. It's titled, it was written while the trial was still kind of in full swing, May 23rd, by Jessica Winter. And it's titled, The Johnny Depp Amber Heard Trial is Not as Complicated as You May Think. The entirety of the case rests on 12 words. And what I loved about this article was it was basically highlighting the absurdity of claiming $50 million based on essentially 12 words. And when you read those 12 words, they're pretty benign, right? So I'm not even going to read those words, but according to the New Yorker, according to this article, quote, that half sentence in the Post, that's the Washington Post, this is quoting from the article, that's the whole case. That half sentence in the Post, that's $50 million. And I've made this point in previous videos and no one really cared. Johnny Depp lost a 2020 defamation lawsuit against a British tabloid, The Sun, which is far more brazen in its language. It called Depp a wife beater. And despite the United Kingdom's strict libel laws and a reverse burden of proof, the High Court in London found the vast majority of Heard's claims to be substantially true. And yet earlier this month, the presiding judge in the Virginia case, Penzi Ascarati, rejected Heard's motion to dismiss. Ascarati cited evidence that jurors could weigh that the statements were about the plaintiff, that the statements were published and that the statement was false, and that the defendant made the statement knowing it to be false, or that the defendant made it so recklessly as to amount to willful disregard of the truth. I'm not going to go through all of this. It's just too much to go through, but read the article if you can. Jessica Winter also highlights the weird motivation behind the trial to begin with, saying, quote, how difficult it is to fathom Depp's motivations for instigating it. So she's saying, I don't understand what Johnny was trying to do here. She says, it's difficult to fathom Depp's motivations. He and his supporters say he filed the suit to clear his name, but it has put more terrible behavior of his on the record than any scrubbed and ghostwritten op-ed could do. And this, I think, is such a good point, is you look at the op-ed, you look at the language of the op-ed, you look at the tone of the op-ed. You can also compare it to the Sun article and say, wow, it's so toothless compared to that article. And that in itself is a defense. And unfortunately, the lawyers in the Depp versus Heard didn't even think of doing that, as far as I know. But you compare what Amber Heard wrote in that op-ed to Johnny Depp's own words in texts and say, which one is more damaging? And the only way to really make that point is really to read some of the things he says. But I'm not going to do that here. I'm just not going to, I mean, it's in the article, you can read it if you like. But Jessica Winter makes a fantastic point by juxtaposing that. But I think it's important to ask the question. She says, it's difficult to fathom Depp's motivations. Well, I don't know if it is that difficult. Isn't the motive revenge? A big old star feeling diminished and wanting to twinkle once more. And all the better if it's at another rising star's and another former lover's expense. Revenge. And revenge must be sweet for him right now, I think. She goes on to write, quote, when Heard obtained the temporary restraining order against Depp, she stated, his relationship with reality oscillates, right? And I've said this already, that one of the things that you take out of this case is you say, Johnny's reality has become our reality. And what does that say about us? She's now saying his relationship with reality oscillates. And I don't know whether it's any surprise that a lot of people who love Johnny Depp probably watch a lot of movies. So how good is your relationship with reality? I don't know if that's an unfair thing to say. Maybe that's oversimplifying it. But anyway, she says that Amber said Johnny's relationship with reality oscillates. Going back to the New Yorker article, quote, under direct examination in the Fairfax trial, Heard offered context for a recording of a telephone conversation with Depp from shortly after she filed for divorce in 2016, in which she tried to persuade him to agree to a mutual gag order owing to the ample evidence that she had against him. In other words, again, if you're trying to make the case that she's out to get him, that she's undermining him, that she's trying to jump off of his shoulders, that she's trying to make a platform of him, then why on earth is she doing this? She's saying, let's neither of us really talk about this. Let's just let it all go. The article goes on to say, quote, this recording is extraordinary, and so is what Heard said on the stand about it. She said, these are Amber's words, I was begging Johnny to not make me prove what I've had to sit on the stand in front of you, in front of all of you, and prove. I was begging not to do this, not to sit where I am today. I didn't want this. I don't want to be here. I didn't want to be there then. And I was trying to point out something to somebody who I thought did not have a firm grasp on reality, end quote. And then does that make an impression on you guys? Let me just look at some of your comments. We're now at 70% saying Amber Heard shouldn't appeal. Seems to just be going up. HI says you have to be in front of a judge. A judge doesn't hand out restraint orders like candy bars. Teresa says, what's up with the phone and all the info data on it? Heard the phone will be called into evidence if she appeals. Lebuku says he's not old or washed up. Okay. Well, I'm just saying what the magazine writer wrote. Okay, so let's just finish off by looking at the end of this article from the New Yorker. It's really worth reading. I'll put another link in chat in case you missed it. So she kind of wraps up by saying, quote, "In a sense, though, Depp may be permanently excused from reality. This may help to explain why he wanted this trial, why he got it, and why, against all odds, he has a decent chance of winning it. In another, more disturbing sense, whether in the adoring throngs of his fans outside the courthouse each morning or the inescapable hashtag Amber Heard is a liar memes on every platform, Depp's reality has been made our own." I think that's just such a strong statement. Johnny Depp's reality has been made our own. Is that reality? Is that right? Or do we need to appeal that reality? Okay, and that brings us to the next sort of subheading, which is the disinformation surrounding this trial is real and really serious. I'm going to provide my source for this particular thing. And again, it refers to the UK trial. That's from vice.com. So listen to this. This is quoting from vice.com. Quote, "The Daily Wire spent between $10,000 and $15,000, right? That's on advertising. The Daily Wire spent between 10 grand and 15 grand promoting an article giving a partial account of the trial." And I think this is on social media, like on Facebook ads, that kind of thing. And the article is titled, "The 14 Most Shocking Revelations in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard Defamation Trial." And then the article repeatedly reports Depp's claims while barely mentioning Heard's. And then it talks about 11 of the 14 revelations framed in favor of Depp. It leads with the allegation made by Depp that Heard defecated in their bed after a fight, a claim which resulted in hackers changing the actor's name on IMDb to Amber Turd. The story does not reference Heard's counterclaim that the feces was their dog. So this is just talking about how beyond kind of pure social media, you've kind of got certain platforms that are sort of almost trying to harness the hatred towards Amber and trying to inflate it and intensify it, but to make money out of it. And they write these articles that they know people want to hear, and then they pay thousands of dollars in advertising to get people there, and then they make even more money, right? And that's why, I'm talking about Johnny's reality becoming our reality. Well, what does that say about us? Remember what I said about my sister going to order a hamburger, and she said, "Can I have a cheese and bacon burger?" And the guy said, "Well, we've only got bacon and cheese," right? And I kind of think that flipping is a similar feeling of with the the Depp versus Heard case. There's a kind of a flipping of reality. And you have a similar flipping of reality in the Daniel, Redland case, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. There's a similar flipping, I think, of reality. You'll see why I say that. At the very bottom of the article, readers are told the views expressed in this piece are the author's own and do not necessarily represent those of the Daily Wire. Then it goes on to say, the Daily Wire has also been promoting videos on Facebook. Amber Heard is at fault. That's one article's name. This man, Depp, lost his entire career based on allegations absent of a shred of evidence. And then it says here, that this particular person is contradicting the judgment of the UK court, which ruled that 12 allegations by Depp towards Heard more likely than not did occur. So you kind of got all of this stuff, all of these disinformation campaigns running alongside just to make money, right? And you do run the risk of being really unpopular if you do like what I'm doing. You try and provide the facts. The facts are boring. The facts are not as snazzy and sexy, and they don't go around the world a couple of million times before you figure out, well, none of that was true, but we had fun, didn't we? Right? So I'm going to finish off, unless you guys want me to go on a little bit further. I see we are at 2 hours, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. But I want to finish off by, after I deal with this, I'll ask you guys if you want me to go on a little bit longer. But America has held witch trials before. Do you know what I'm talking about when I refer to that? So I saw an article, I think it was in The Spectator, and it was titled The Witch Trial of Amber Heard, right? And that really resonated with me. I was like, yeah, that's what it was, right? When I say America has held witch trials before, what do you think I'm referring to? Anyone have any ideas? Sherry says, we'd still like to hear about your middle child personality profile if you have the energy. Well, I definitely will. Pam says, is it Salem? Yeah. Labuku, Salem. For Truth says, it's brave of you to speak up. I feel like it takes a bit of an act of courage. Okay, so listen to this. And this is just generic. This comes from Wikipedia. It's just absolutely vanilla information. The Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is not so much the detail, but the overall arc of the story. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm just going to sketch the broad strokes. And I want you to think about the Salem witch trials and think about, is Depp versus Heard similar in any way, right? So you don't need to pay attention to the details. You don't have to remember these dates. You just need to think about it in a general sense, right? So you had the Salem witch trials in colonial Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693. It's quite important to remember those dates. That's when they took place. And then also to look at what happened after that. What is the aftermath? We're talking here about, should Amber Heard appeal, right? If you think that she had a witch trial, should she appeal? Were there appeals in the Salem witch trials? What do you guys think? So it says more than this is incredible. More than 200 people were accused. 200 people were accused of being witches. 30 were found guilty and 19 were executed by hanging, and they were disproportionately women. 14 were women and 5 were men. It's basically 3 times more women were found to be basically evil, right? Then there was one man, and I mean, this really kind of stuck out at me, just the cruelty of this. There was one guy, a guy called Giles Corey. He refused to plead. He just, I think, didn't want to participate. And so what they did was they put heavy rocks on his chest. And I think it took him like 2 or 3 days to suffocate to death. He had like heavy rocks placed on his chest, and then he eventually died unable to breathe. And what was his crime? Well, he refused to plead. Incredibly cruel. Again, this is not my assessment. This is Wikipedia's assessment. They described the Salem witch trials in 1692 and 1693 as one of colonial America's most notorious cases of mass hysteria. Do you need me to say that again? They say this is an episode, and remember, it's a legal episode. It's a legal frenzy that's taking place, right? 200 people are witches. Let's put them on trial. Let's execute them. Let's get rid of them, whatever. They're saying this episode was one of the worst periods of mass hysteria in American history. And they say it's colonial America's history, right? I would suggest that what we've just seen now with Depp versus Heard is a kind of modern mass hysteria, I would definitely say that that is a fair and accurate description. That the mass hysteria that we saw in Salem, like 300 years ago, 3 centuries ago, is it even more? 3 centuries and 20 years. We saw mass hysteria that's totally unfounded and totally irrational 300 years ago. Well, now we seem to be back to that. And it's something that has come up. Books have been written about it. I think The Crucible, isn't that about that? It's something that was so crazy and exceptional that has come up as cultural rhetoric, popular literature, and it's described here as, quote, a vivid cautionary tale about the dangers of isolationism, religious extremism, false accusations, and lapses in due process. And I think you can ask, just in a general way, you can say, did any of that happen here? Was there a danger? And I mean, think about this word isolationism. We've just come out of COVID. Think about the idea of religious extremism. Is that a factor at all in America? False accusations, is that a factor in America? Well, you hear about it all the time. Something is either what it is or it's a hoax. There's like two realities. Lapses in due process, you hear about that all the time. It's like this idea that you can't trust institutions, ergo you can't even trust your fellow man. Your fellow man is a witch. Your fellow woman is a witch. And then it goes on to say what happened in America, in Massachusetts, wasn't like isolated, wasn't the only thing that had ever happened like that in the world, but it was something that was sort of, thankfully, it was sort of winding down. It was something that actually came from the old world, to something that was a problem in the old world, and then it sort of bubbled up sort of once in colonial America and then dissipated. Fortunately, it didn't sort of go on after that. HI says, I've sent links to all your deficit videos to Amber Heard's female attorney. I hope you're okay with that. They need to see them. Well, I hope they're okay with it. Brianna says, how did Nick get turned on by Van Gogh? Jean Carroll says, it's mass social media attacks that hurt, guilty or not. It is wrong. Okay, so the part that I want to sort of emphasize is, in terms of history, the civilization was sort of modernizing. Thanks a lot, Nisi. Nisi says, thank you, Nick. You not only keep us open and fair-minded, you add so much more to your lives. Thank you, chat, for giving him the respect he deserves. Thanks, Nisi. So, the important thing to say here is, in the historical context, these witch trials were sort of fizzling away. And they were certainly fizzling away in the old world, but they'd somehow transported to the new world, and then something happened in Salem. And then it says, many historians consider the lasting effects of the trials to have been highly influential in subsequent United States history. So the Salem witch trials actually impacted a lot of American history. According to the historian George Lincoln Burr, the Salem witchcraft was the rock on which the theocracy shattered. So what they're kind of saying is that these witch trials actually created a more secular society, that society was so shocked by the, I don't know whether you want to say unscientific nature or the way that religious fervor sort of overtook people. And it led to absolute travesties that the people actually got very turned off by it. So in this historian's word, it was the rock on which the theocracy shattered. Certainly not all of it, but a lot of it. Not there yet, thanks very much. So I think it's important to talk about the reality of, like, how could you be found to be a witch, right? So first of all, someone would suspect you, and second of all, you would then be tested, and if you failed the test, well, then you're a witch and then you might be hanged, right? So let me give you an example of how that could take place. Stephanie says, just finished work and dinner. Well, welcome. Stephanie, I think the fact that you've joined means I will make it another 20 minutes longer, maybe. Anyway, we'll see. So this is the test for whether you're a witch or not. And ask yourself whether you would pass this. Ask yourself, if it was a matter of life and death, would the evidence save you? Would your behavior, would your photos of bruises or whatever save you, kind of thing? So listen to the following. This is someone who was tested for being a witch or not. This is her testimony. She says, we were blindfolded and our hands were laid upon the afflicted persons, they being in their fits and falling into their fits at our coming into their presence, as they said. Some led us and laid our hands upon them, and then they said they were well and that we were guilty of afflicting them, whereupon we were all seized as prisoners by a warrant from the justice of the peace, as forthwith carried to Salem. I don't know if you caught that. They would basically have someone who was typically having whatever it was, epileptic fits or fits of some kind. And if this person's hand, so you're a suspect, if this person's hand was placed on this person while they're having a fit, and they stopped having that fit, or there was like a temporary lull in the fit, then they said, okay, well, you're a witch. That was the basis on which they decided that. And so I guess you could speculate, you could infer from that they thought that there were 200 people who could be witches, and then of those 200, around about a quarter, when they laid hands on someone, they stopped having a fit. Okay, so you're guilty, and so you lost your life, kind of thing. But the part that I think is really important is, you might say that's not right or whatever. The part that I think is important is the aftermath to this. You might say that was an injustice. Well, what was the aftermath? You might say with Depp versus Heard, that was right, or you might say that was an injustice. What's the aftermath to that? So bear in mind, just in terms of the timeline, all of this happened between 1692 and 1693. So it took about 2 years to begin to respond. And we mentioned earlier that an appeal can take 2 years in terms of if Amber Heard does appeal. It's a long process, it can take 2 years. In terms of this, it took about 2 years for things to start to reverse. And how it started was a guy called Thomas More, spelled M-A-U-L-E, and he was a Quaker. And he did something very brave in this society, in this context. Thomas More publicly criticized the handling of the trials. He said this wasn't right. He criticized the Puritan leaders, and he wrote a book. And I think in chapter 29 of his book, and the book was titled "Truth Held Forth and Maintained," he said the following. So this is a quote from his book. "It were better that 100 witches should live than that one person be put to death for a witch, which is not a witch." So it's basically saying, I would rather that 100 witches that are out there continue to be alive than you put one witch to death that isn't a witch, right? Quite strong language. And as a result, for publishing this book, this guy was imprisoned for 12 months, so a year. He went to jail for a year for saying that. And then he was put on trial and ultimately found not guilty. And so that is the beginning of this process. One person spoke out, one person wrote a book, He was put on trial, not found guilty, and then we jump from there, from 1695, we jump 11 years into the future. 11 years go by with nothing much happening. And then you had someone called Anne Putnam Jr. She was one of the most active accusers. She was one of the most vocal people saying, you're a witch, this is witchcraft or whatever. She joined the Salem Village Church and publicly asked for forgiveness. She actually had someone who was part of this, let's say, witch trial saying, I'm sorry, 11 years later. She said that she had not acted out of malice, but had been deluded by Satan into denouncing innocent people. And then she mentioned Rebecca Nurse in particular. So that's how this is. I've still got a little bit of water here. So that was in 1706. Then another 5 years go by with not much happening. So we're now going almost 15, it's 11, we're almost at 20 years after the trials. Now something starts happening. The General Court passed a bill reversing the judgment against the 22 people listed in the 1709 petition. So they basically, the court's basically saying, although these people are no longer alive, sorry, we were wrong, you guys aren't guilty. We found you guilty, you were executed, but now, so many years later, you're not guilty, sorry. 2 months after that, on December 17, 1711, the governor, Joseph Dudley, authorized monetary compensation to the 22 people that were executed. So they were actually, the families were compensated, right? So I want to ask you guys, we are now 325 odd years later. How good are you at identifying a witch? Let's have a look at some of your comments. I see 360 have voted. Make sure you vote if you haven't. Misa Mom, good to see you. Came in late. What are we talking about? Salem witch trials. We're now going to talk about Amber. We're going to talk about Amber's a middle child. What does that mean? And isn't it time we got to know Amber Heard? Now you might say, no, I don't want to get a no. You might say, I don't want to get to know Amber Heard. Well, then that's your point. I do think it's similar to the Salem witch trials, where it's like you basing your assessment on surfaces, on something that is very superficial. And so I want to refer to an article from the Times. It's a British publication. It refers to this description of Amber Heard. This is what's in the article. Quote, she's a manipulative gold digger who married Depp as a way of elevating her profile and who, far from being a victim, is clearly a perpetrator. You can just tell, and that's in inverted commas. And of course, the you can just tell is the Salem witch trial standard for deciding whether someone's guilty or innocent. They have damned the way in which she cried on the witness stand. And of course, in the Salem witch trials, you damn someone by simply saying, I believe that you're guilty. They've damned the way in which she cried on the witness stand is not merely unconvincing, but further proof of her inferior acting skills, i.e. solid evidence that she married Depp to benefit her career because she clearly can't rely on talent to win her roles. This is a quote from an article in the Times. And I think that about sums up the standard on social media, which, let's face it, is telling you what you want to hear. Social media, mostly, this channel isn't like most social media. I don't tell you what you want to hear. I try and tell you what I think is authentic? In other words, what is likely, what is reality in terms of kind of a scientific way of looking at things. I'm not saying I'm omniscient and I'm God and I'm all-knowing. I'm just saying what I try and tell you is what I think is likely, and it's probably not what you want to hear a lot of the time. But social media gets to make more money by telling you what you want to hear. So it's a tough one. Who is more sleazy? Those creating the content that they know the audience wants, or the audience's mind, which is in the gutter? And that brings us to, before we go on with Amber Heard, I want to talk a little bit about the idea that Amber was cheating on Johnny with a woman and that she was having a threesome. And I don't want to mention the creator's name, but you've got a kind of a male creator that is so shocked by all of this. Oh, Amber Heard had a threesome and she cheated on her husband and all this kind of thing. And I kind of like scratch my head and I'm like, have you never watched porn? What century are you living in? Because 37% of the internet is porn. And it's like, okay, so this person did that. Is it so shocking, or are you trying to manufacture shock value? I think in 2010, they said 12% of all internet sites are porn. I think that comes from TechCrunch. So about 10% of the entire internet was porn in 2010. A year ago, that had jumped by, that had trebled to 37%. So they believe that 37% of the internet right now is pornography, which is more than a third. That's quite a lot. Funny enough, I looked at a map, status quo, thanks a lot for that. I looked at a map and it showed the biggest or the top porn search terms per American state. And threesome came up in Kentucky. It was, I think, the only state where it was threesome. There were other states that had others. Of course, Johnny Depp comes from Kentucky. That's just a bit of a coincidence. A little bit of random information there. 25% of Google searches are porn as well. I was quite surprised that in terms of the search terms, threesome comes like 12th. It's after stepmom, after MILF kind of stuff. The number one searching country for pornographic items is America. That's number one. Number two is the UK. Number three is Japan, which is quite surprising to me. And number four is France. But the point I'm trying to make is Amber Heard having a threesome is like this crazy, wild thing. But, I mean, 25% of Google searches are porn. So it seems like a bit of hypocrisy. Really does seem like a bit of hypocrisy. Also, that particular person making that claim, it's like, what is the date when she was apparently seeing other people? Because that's not provided. Like, I'm with another person, I'm with another person. Well, when are you with another person? And that's the crucial thing. If it's at the end of your marriage, then is it really such a big deal? I'm talking about your marriage is over, maybe it's time to see other people. And then see that all in the context of Amber Heard said that Johnny Depp, she was under the impression, it's unfortunate that we don't know the identity of the person, but she was under the impression that he cheated on her the day after their wedding. That's pretty devastating. I mean, how do you continue with a relationship knowing that? Like, how do you continue with a marriage under those circumstances? Is it even possible? And it does make you kind of wonder, you know, if we're saying Johnny Depp's reality is our reality, well, didn't that become Amber's reality for a long time as well? That Johnny Depp's reality became hers until it didn't, right? Teresa Carter says, I didn't hear anything about porn either. Well, the thing about that is this idea that Amber Heard had a threesome and that is so shocking. And it's like Q, absolutely shocked face, or Amber Heard had an affair, absolute shocked face. It's this kind of, I don't know, I just see it as absolute hypocrisy. It's like, where's that shock when someone is absolutely SHIT faced on drugs? Or is that okay? I don't know, it just seems like selective indignation. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest. I did go to a little bit of effort to get those facts. Now let's get back to finding out a bit more about Amber Heard. She's a middle child. What does that mean? Well, isn't it time we got to know her a little bit better? I know, Sherry, you wanted me to go into this. So leave it to a British publication, in this case The Times, to go to a little effort to actually find out who the real Amber Heard is. Not Camille Vasquez's version, the generic version. So what you're going to find below is anchored in Amber Heard's demonstrable backstory. And I think this is from The Times, quote, Amber Heard is a famously complicated, contradictory person who exists in a time where that sort of thing is perceived as unacceptable, undermining to one's integrity, as opposed to, say, an inevitable function of being alive and human. Now, I want you to think about this in the context of the Salem witch trials. How do you decide who's a witch and who isn't? Well, if you're living in Salem in 1692, 1693, you might say, you are a little bit contradictory, you're a little bit strange, you're a little bit, you're a bit of a threat to me as well, I don't like that, etc., etc. So she exists in a time where being complicated or contradictory is not very good, because we want things to be simple. We want surfaces. We want things to be simple. So here are the basics. Amber Heard's 36 years old. She was born on April 2nd, 1986 in Austin, Texas. She was brought up just outside of Austin in a place called Manor, with a fairly small town, population 13,400. Here's the important part. She's the middle child of 3 daughters, right? Born to Patricia, a researcher. So her mother is a researcher and her father owns a building company. Now, I think the middle child aspect is worth highlighting. We're going to go into this in a little bit of detail. The stereotypes of the middle child, and I happen to be a middle child. Anyone here also middle child? Let's have a look. Anyone here that's also a middle child? Anyone in chat? Somebody says, Bruce says, if you float, you're a witch. If you sink, you're not. You die either way. Well, yeah, they would, I think in Europe, they would tie little girls sometimes, or women in sacks, and then throw them into the water. And if they floated, you're a witch. But then I think they just let them, I don't know. Are there any middle children here? Status quo says yes. Not me, I'm the baby. Last child, oldest, no, oldest. Teresa says me. Pam says middle. Okay, Pam, there we go. Stephanie, are you the oldest? Okay. Cliff Notes, middle daughter of 3. Okay, so we've got a couple of middle kids with their issues. Bria, I'm a middle child. Okay. Lebuku says youngest for 9 years, then a middle child. Okay. Freudian slip says yes. Hi says yes, I am. Okay. A couple of you. Donna McLeod as well. Okay. So those who are middle kids this should resonate with you. The stereotypes of the middle child, and as I say, I'm one, are that they are peacekeepers, they are fairness obsessed, and used to being treated as second best or not good enough. They don't enjoy the rights of the eldest child or the privileges of the youngest, which makes them in a way tough and able to endure slights and undermining probably more than most. Middle children also often have a more authentic kind of confidence in the sense that it's more based on reality. In my family, I'm the most independent and successful of my siblings. Now, I want to read that again, and I want you to think of Amber Heard. I want you to think of what you know about Amber Heard within this context. The stereotypes of the middle child are that they are peacekeepers, fairness obsessed, and used to being treated as second best or not good enough. They don't enjoy the rights of the eldest child or the privileges of the youngest, which makes them in a way tough and able to endure slights and undermining probably more than most. Are they able to endure humiliation on social media? Probably better than most. Middle children are also often have a more authentic kind of confidence in the sense that it's more based on reality. You must remember Amber had to have confidence to leave Johnny Depp, to divorce him. She also needed confidence. She's going to need confidence to appeal, right? And to get money for an appeal. I say in my family, I'm the most independent and successful of my siblings. In Amber Heard's family, I think that's also true. Now, if you're Camille Vasquez, you might want to highlight other stereotypes associated with middle children, that they're resentful. Middle children are resentful, they're neglectful, they've got no drive, they feel like they don't belong and are just negative people. And so you might think that fits Amber Heard to a T. She's resentful, she's neglectful, she's got no drive, she's using Johnny Depp. They don't feel like they belong, and they're just negative people. They're not credible. What does the science say about this? We know that Amber Heard's a middle child. What does the science say about it? According to the authors Katrin Schumann and Dr. Catherine Selman, middle children are typically not embittered wallflowers. They tend to be more socially adaptive and good team players. Statistically, 52% of US presidents are middle children. Some examples of famous middle children include Nelson Mandela, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Abraham Lincoln, Charles Darwin, and Madonna. According to the authors, middle kids are often trailblazers, more likely to affect change than any other birth order. In terms of self-identity, Amber described herself as girly on the inside while being a tomboy on the outside. So I think this is going back to the Time article. She said, quote, "I was very girly on the inside, but my dad was not raising a girly girl. He was raising someone who could keep up with him. My dad taught me to break horses and he'd yell at me, 'Don't be such a,' and it's the P word. And she said, I was like, 'Dad, I'm 8. As a teenager, Amber Heard read Ayn Rand, George Orwell, and read Ray Bradbury. And actually, if you go on to Amber Heard's Instagram, you can often see her. In fact, I think her very first post, I could be wrong, but I remember one particular Instagram, she's in the middle of like a circle of books, but you actually often see her reading books, which is quite interesting. And she talks about that quite effusively. She says, I discovered the magic in it, meaning in reading. She said, I'd look around the room wondering, does nobody else get this? She grew fixated on the idea of leaving Manor and lied about her age to get a job as a lifeguard at 13, then started saving towards her escape. So this is someone who didn't rest on her laurels. She left a comfortable existence and kind of made herself very uncomfortable. And the story continues, right? So she's a reader. That's what we know about her. She's also someone who felt the need to forge her identity. She didn't want her small town life to kind of be imposed on her. She wanted to break out of that. And so she wanted to escape out of her circumstances. No one did this for her. She did it for herself. It's not a case that dad kind of bought her a ticket to New York and bought her an apartment in New York. She was like self-starting, right, from the small town, humble situation. So her backstory goes on as follows. At 16 years of age, Amber Heard paid for headshots that she sent to modeling agencies in New York. She moved there a year later. She says, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So she's in New York, she's 16 years old, she's a model, and then just 1 year goes by and she hates modeling. It's just not who she is. I just want to have a look at this comment here. HI says, I'm middle. I felt like Cinderella theatre, the fireplace kind. No one wanted me around. I took neglect punishment, yet I had to clean the house, was on my own at 18. Nisi says, I think that's where looks in our society helps. I think her looks definitely provided her with a bit of a magic carpet. But the interesting thing is, she must have been about 17 when she said, actually, I've had enough of modeling, right? That's quite a thing to do as well, is to say, this thing that I could take the world by storm with, I'm not going to do anymore. Bruce says, Teresa, you were less spoiled than your younger sibling and less respected than your older, question mark. Stephanie says, Amber is an independent person. And I think all of that goes into why she probably will appeal, because she's got quite a strong sense of self. So she loathed modeling, and she got her first acting role in the original film version of Friday Night Lights. That was in 2004. Not quite sure how old she was when that happened, but I presume she wasn't very old. And then this article in Time goes on to say, quote, in all this, she exhibited the kind of ambition and drive that might have been viewed as commendable, the triumph of the hard-grafting, small-town underdog outsider. Instead, this seems to contribute to the idea that Heard is an opportunist, a social climber, a gold digger. So again, which reality are you accepting here? Johnny Depp's reality? Are you seeing Amber as the sort of witch? So if she does something, oh, that's a sign that she's this way or that? Or are you seeing her the way that she really is? And what is that? Let me read that again. And this is, I'm just reading the article from the Times in the UK. It's just somebody else's opinion, and you can say, interesting opinion, I'm going to throw it away, or interesting opinion, right? So let me read that again. In all this, meaning leaving home, becoming a lifeguard, becoming a model, no one said she had to do it, she chose to do it. Becoming an actress, in all this, she exhibited the kind of ambition and drive that might have been viewed as commendable, the triumph of the hard-grafting, small-town underdog outsider. Instead, this seems to contribute to the idea that Heard is an opportunist, a social climber, a gold digger. So you might say, what should she have done? Should she just have stayed at home? Should she have become a farmer? Should she have become a mechanic? What, you know, should she never have gotten married, or should she have married a younger person, right? It goes on to say, Amber Heard is the kind of woman who would marry a film star considerably older than her to benefit her career. And I don't think it helped Amber Heard that she sort of went from Johnny Depp, who's like at one point was, I think, America's most famous star, in a way, I suppose you could say most well-paid star, to dating the world's wealthiest man. I think other women look at that and feel, that's not right. How does that reflect on me? What about, she's living the fairy tale, what about me? And so you sort of wonder, is the witch in the story Amber Heard, or are you playing the wicked witch to Cinderella or Snow White? Is Amber Heard Cinderella or Snow White, and you playing the role of witch and trying to throw out poisoned apples? I'm just asking. Or is Amber Heard actually the witch in this? Is she an opportunist for marrying a film star a lot older than her? Johnny Depp is 58, 22 years older than her. Or is Johnny Depp the opportunist? I mean, he left the mother of his two kids. Some would say he cheated on the mother of his two kids. I'm not sure what the details are of that, but he was with Vanessa Paradis for 14 years and left her for someone much younger. Well, what's that? Isn't that opportunism from a man? Or is a woman only opportunistic but a man's not? So I'm not sure which side of the equation one needs to point fingers. Her dating an older guy or an almost 60-year-old with someone in her 30s, and that's now. Depp this weekend really epitomized, at least to me, the man-child who doesn't want to grow up, and thus becomes more and more absurd. Wacko Jacko was kind of like that, but apparently Johnny's weirdness in the 21st century is perhaps the new normal. We like wacko, we don't like contradictory, we don't like someone who is independent, we don't like someone who is, how is she described here? Complicated, contradictory. So the article goes on to say, perhaps this is a consequence of Heard's beauty, and this is something I've been bringing up kind of repeatedly, and it's how I started this episode. Has Amber Heard's beauty played a role in all of this? Or do people feel threatened by her, men and women? She's also a bit of a contradiction in terms of her sexuality. If you're a man, is this beautiful woman that you're with going to be attracted to another woman? If you're a woman, is this beautiful woman that you're with going to be attracted to another man? Who is she? What does she want? And how do you contain this sort of kind of explosion of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the creative forces that go into someone that, you know, eventually acts in a movie that makes over $1 billion. Someone who plays the role of a superhero, in her case, Mira. So anyway, the article says, perhaps this is a consequence of Heard's beauty. The director Tom Hooper, who cast Heard as the ballerina Ulla Paulsen in the 2015 film The Danish Girl, starring Eddie Redmayne, said he was looking for, quote, the quintessence of feminine. And of course, that person is very hard to find. In Amber, I had found my idea of feminine beauty. She's breathtaking. And that is what Johnny Depp said as well. He also said that he used I can't remember what the name of her character was in The Rum Diary, but when he found this character that he'd read about in Hunter S. Thompson's book, you kind of get the sense that she also took his breath away, and also that he took her breath away, right? And I personally think this is the real reason she's loathed, because she's feared. A really beautiful woman is feared by men and women alike. And she does have a fearsome beauty. I suspect the images of bruises are quite so unbelievable because of the sculpted perfection that surrounds it. Even though you're looking at a battered and bruised face, it still appears beautiful and almost untouched. The article goes on to say, quote, Had her features been a little less breathtaking, a little more wholesome seeming, had she embraced, say, the public goofiness of Cameron Diaz or Sandra Bullock or Jennifer Aniston, those are all three beautiful women, but they sort of seem to soften what may be otherwise quite intimidating with a kind of humor, sense of humor. So if Amber had done something to counter the impact of her looks and lessen their perceived threat, perhaps she might have been championed for her daring and her drive as opposed to damned for it. So it's almost like, it seems like this really simplistic thing of, you are so beautiful, you're a witch. Simple as that. And I think the threat of a perfect movie star is real. I remember this being a problem with Tom Cruise, and I think I read a biography of Tom Cruise, but I seem to remember reading somewhere that there was this idea that he was becoming an intimidating movie star, and that's why he chose to act against type in Jerry Maguire. If you think about the Tom Cruise in Top Gun, although he's a strong character, he can also be someone that may be intimidating to other men, right? Maybe the fact that he's a shorter guy makes him less intimidating to other men. But that's the fine line you've got to tread when you cast someone like Superman. Is he going to be accessible, or are you going to look at him and be like, almost like he's so handsome that he's actually scary in a way? He's actually like otherworldly. And I think Tom Cruise has sort of mastered that thing of the perfect movie star. I'm not saying, I mean, there are other aspects to Tom Cruise that one can also talk about, but I'm just saying maybe because he's short and he knows how to play an understated version of himself, even when the film itself is over the top. And Top Gun Maverick is a good example of that. He plays an understated version of himself, even though what he does in the film is sort of crazy kind of thing. Okay, so to go back to the article, it says, Amber Heard, this is quoting from the article, Amber Heard worked constantly through her 20s and into her 30s on Drop Dead Sexy in 2005, All the Boys Love Mandy Lane in 2006, Pineapple Express in 2008, Drive Angry and The Rum Diary, that was where she met Johnny Depp, that was in 2011, Machete Kills in 2013, Magic Mike XXL in 2015, and The Danish Girl, and so on. Acting was in no sense a smooth ride for Heard. And then they talk a little bit about that. So you might say, because she was so beautiful, she just had this sort of magic carpet ride through Hollywood. Well, at 36 years old, I'd still never heard of Amber Heard. She may have acted in all of those movies. I'd never heard of her. I'd actually seen her in Aquaman, but I didn't know that person that I saw was Amber Heard. I suppose I would have, if all things being equal, if she was cast in Aquaman 2 and that went on to do really well and she had a bigger role, it would have been like, oh, so that person is Amber Heard kind of thing. So it's not just that if you're a pretty face, you have a magic carpet ride through Hollywood. So Drive Angry, where she starred opposite Nicolas Cage, that flopped. The Rum Diary flopped, which she met Johnny Depp in that movie. In 2013, she worked on the adaptation of Martin, is it Amos's novel London Fields? That was a big catastrophe. According to the Times, quote, that shoot went terribly and the producers sued her for $10 million for breach of contract. She countersued on the basis that the use of a body double made it look as if she had appeared in sex scenes to which she hadn't consented. So that definitely is something that puts things into a bit of perspective, that she's been in some kind of legal trouble before. when London Fields was released in 2018, so the movie was started in 2013, 5 years went by, and it had the second worst box office opening weekend to date. So that's like a major bomb. Amber Heard was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actress. So she's obviously felt, she's been through very low lows. She's already felt very humiliated. I don't know if that really compares to the current thing. And then the article, this is the last quote from the article. It summarizes the whole thing by saying, Hollywood is rammed to the rafters with beautiful, charismatic, difficult people of not universally appreciated ability. They are nonetheless perfectly good movie stars, possibly the best kind of movie star. Depp is hardly known for his vast range. Since when has a checkered acting career been proof of a person's questionable character? It isn't. Let me read that again. Hollywood is rammed to the rafters with beautiful, charismatic, difficult people of not universally appreciated ability. They are nonetheless perfectly good movie stars, possibly the best kind of movie star. Depp is hardly known for his vast range. Since when has a checkered acting career been proof of a person's questionable character? It isn't. So there's some insight into Amber Heard that you perhaps haven't seen before or heard before. I know that she wants to be seen as more human, I guess. That's what she said in the interview. I think you are seen as more human by telling your story, but I mean telling the story of your not like incidents and so on, but to some extent just the story of your life. And I remember this, I wrote this before the verdict, and so I was saying, if Amber wins tomorrow or if she loses, what life advice might come in useful for a middle child? And one of those authors said this to the middle children, said the following: if you're a middle child, you'll be happiest if you continue to carve your own path through life and take calculated risks. Seems my throat's giving up just at the right time. I don't know why this says 1 hour and 7 minutes. Surely that's not right. Okay, guys. I think that's basically my my spiel. If you're a middle child, carve your own path through life. Take calculated risks. Don't be afraid to rock the boat once in a while. And I think I'm kind of doing that right now. I think I'm taking a bit of a risk making these videos. My channel's already taken a bit of a battering. But I am carving my own channel compared to a lot of the other channels, if not all of the other channels on YouTube. I am taking a calculated risk, and I think, rocking the boat a little bit. But I do believe in what I'm saying, and it's not like I'm stupid or I haven't thought about what I'm talking about. I've done a lot of reading. I've paid a lot of attention to it as well. It's also not my whole world, but I nevertheless think it's quite important. I think what we're talking about is quite important because, once again, over and over and over again in true crime, I feel like true crime is a great lens in which to test, are you able to see reality? So you have this case or that person, and then you say, are you right about that? Are you seeing that in a clear way? Yes or no? Well, are you able to see in your own life in a clear way? And that's why I want to talk about the Redlich case tomorrow, Danielle Redlich, which is when I watched the verdict of that case, and I don't want to tell you the verdict. I want you to, if you don't know what the verdict is, don't tell anyone. But I want you to try and practice that thing of keeping an open mind, and also seeing how the pendulum can shift. Let the pendulum shift, because so many of us feel uncomfortable with that. We feel uncomfortable with our mind changing. We want this the certainty of certainty, the security of certainty as well. And I think it's actually, I remember when I lived in South Korea and I was finding myself and developing my identity. I remember coming to the epiphany where for so many years I'd felt really unhappy with the fact that I didn't have a single-minded attitude to things. I thought that that was a flaw. And this is what I mean. When you have a single-minded approach to something, you see things in just one way, just in one dimension. When you have the ability to keep two thoughts in your mind at the same time, so in other words, you see something one way and then you say, but what about that? You see something in that way and you think, well, what about the other thing? And that is actually a gift. It's a gift to see what something is and also what it's not. To sometimes be counterintuitive. And I don't mean, I think a lot of people thought you just taking this view on depth versus earth to be contrarian. That's not true at all. But I do think just having the ability to think about an alternative possibility helps you get to the actual reality. So if you're only able to think about one possible outcome, and I mentioned this earlier in the live. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. I'll touch on that in a moment. Earlier this evening, I was at a dinner with my dad, and I mentioned that I was reading this book where the crawdads sing, and my dad's girlfriend was there, and I said, it's written by Delia Owens, the same author of this book. And she was absolutely adamant that that wasn't true. And the only way you get out of that rigid box of thinking is when you start thinking, could it be true? Could something else be true here? Right? And even when she looked on her phone and she saw, well, the author's Delia, and she said, that can't be right. Right? And so anyway, the epiphany that I had was that the ability to think of an alternative, just to consider an alternative, is going to help you get to what reality is, right? Like, what is the reality of you? So if you're a woman, you're a woman, you're also not a man. Maybe it's not it's a very binary way to describe someone these days, but something generally is not only what it is, it's also something that it isn't. So you can describe something in terms of what it is, but also in terms of what it isn't. And both those descriptions are getting you closer to what that thing is, right? And you're going to know that thing better, not only by knowing what it is, but by knowing what it isn't. And a good example of this is Amber Heard. You might say she's this, she's that, she's a liar, she's all these different kinds of things. Okay, what isn't she? Right? And go down that path and think about things in a little bit of a different way. And the reason why you want to do this, I'm trying to change your mind or convert you in terms of the Amber Heard case. It's in terms of your own life. Are you able to think of your own life in a realistic way, in a way that's going to help you to think critically, be practical in your own life? That's really where you apply that. So you play with those thoughts in certain of these cases, but you apply it in your own life. So I hope that's been useful to you guys. Timmy's just jumped up on me I just want to read Stephanie's comment. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Thank you for continuing to be authentic. Keep on rocking. I don't think women dislike Amber because she's beautiful. Beauty is only skin deep. She doesn't have a sparkling, endearing personality or depth, nor does Johnny. I think that's an interesting observation. I'm not sure if it's totally true that Amber's beauty has absolutely no impact. But I do think she struggles to project herself in a way that works. So that's probably something that she could work on. I think that is something that's true with a lot of beautiful people, is they've never had to work very hard on being likable because people like them anyway. It's so easy for them to attract people. Yvonne Phillips, thank you very much. What does Yvonne say? Yvonne, thank you. Appreciate everything you've said today and every day. Thanks a lot, Yvonne. Yvonne's a regular on the Van Gogh letters. And yeah, it's always good to have you in chat, Yvonne. Thanks a lot. Okay, guys. How long has this live been going on? Because my phone is saying an hour and 15 minutes. Definitely not been that short. Holly Marie says, I wish I could have met someone like you who's non-judgmental. Thanks, Holly. HI says, she's just a person. Beverly Lawyer, beauties walking all over town, some disgusting, some modest and wonderful. Bruce T says 3 hours plus, yeah, which is why my voice is kind of on the verge. Nisi says, we love Van Gogh letters. Okay, so I hope you guys have found this live stream useful, interesting. I did spend quite a lot of time reading up on it. If you guys are listening not live afterwards and you want me to share some of the links, then just ask me in the comments. But some of the links that I read were truly fascinating, and you really want to read the whole article. Some of those articles, like by the New Yorker and Time Magazine and so on, really worth reading. So if you missed it and you want to read it, let me know. Also, if you're listening after the live, you're listening to the replay, and you've enjoyed this and you want to make a contribution, you're more than welcome. Just hit the thanks icon there. Okay, guys. So tomorrow, if it's not tomorrow, it'll be Saturday. I'm going to cover the Danielle Redlick case. And that's a case where that's very legally intertextual to Amber Heard, where a lot of people are saying that's how someone in the situation should act. And we're going to interrogate that, and we're going to see what the reality is there. So that's really going to be quite interesting. I've seen a lot of people who are interested in Amber Heard case went on to that case, almost like a relay. And the question is, did the jury get the result right there? And what do you guys think? What do you guys think about the outcome there? Okay, so I'm going to say adios. Just thanks to the mods who are here, Nisi, Sharon, Jean, Stephanie. Don't know if I'm missing anyone. I don't know. Bria, I see you still here. Bria, it's 2:00 in the morning in France. I think you must maybe turn in. I also want to thank the members who are here, and also for all the super chats. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.